Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Jackson Whitmore, and I've been a park ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for 13 years. I'm telling you this story because I need someone to know what really happened up on Devil's Backbone Ridge back in October of 1973. The official reports won't tell you the truth. They can't. I grew up in these mountains, just like my daddy and his daddy before him. My grandmother used to warn me about things that ain't quite right in the hollers, but I never paid much attention to her old Cherokee stories. After all, I'd seen plenty of real dangers in these mountains. Bears, cliffs, sudden weather changes. I figured that was scary enough without worrying about ghost stories. The night this all started, I was sitting in the ranger station doing my evening radio check-in. Rain was tapping against the windows and fog was rolling through the valleys like it does every October. I remember thinking how peaceful it was, how safe. That was before I knew about the bone collectors. "This is Ranger Whitmore checking in from Station 7, I said into the radio. "Weather's holding steady, visibility down to about 50 yards with the fog. No incidents to report." But even as I said it, something felt wrong. The forest outside was too quiet. Usually you'd hear owls calling or raccoons moving around. That night, there was nothing but the rain and an odd clicking sound I couldn't place. 3 hunters had been missing for 72 hours. The Jameson brothers, Earl and Roy, and their cousin, Pete Hawkins. These weren't city folks who'd wandered off the trail. They'd been hunting these mountains since they were kids. Earl could track a deer through a creek, and Roy knew every cave and ridge for 50 miles. Their truck was found at the Bone Valley trailhead, doors wide open, hunting gear scattered around like they'd left in a hurry. But here's the strange part. Their rifles were gone, but they'd left behind their food, water, and camping gear. No hunter leaves his supplies behind unless something's chasing him. I'd been married to Mary for 6 months, and we were talking about starting a family. She taught school down in Gatlinburg and worried every time I went up into the high country alone. "Promise me you'll be careful," she'd said that morning. "Something feels different about this one." I should have listened to her. The first sign of real trouble came when I found their campsite. It was in a clearing about 2 miles up the Devil's Backbone Trail, right where the old Cherokee burial ground used to be. The fire pit was stone cold, but arranged around it in a perfect circle were dozens of small animal bones, rabbit bones, bird bones, all picked clean and white as snow. I'd never seen anything like it. In 13 years of ranger work, I'd come across plenty of strange things. Hunters who got lost and built weird shelters, teenagers trying to scare each other with fake rituals. But this felt different. The bones were arranged too perfectly, too carefully, like someone had been practicing. The next morning, I headed back up to expand the search. The fog had lifted some, but the forest still felt wrong. My radio kept picking up interference, a strange clicking sound that seemed to follow me as I moved through the trees. I was about a mile from the campsite when I found the first set of tracks. They started out normal enough. Boot prints from Roy's hiking boots, size 11, just like the ones I'd seen at the truck. But after about 50 yards, something changed. The boot prints got mixed up with bare footprints, and those bare prints were wrong. Too long, too narrow, with what looked like an extra toe. "Base, this is Whitmore," I called into my radio. "I'm following tracks north of the campsite. Something's not right up here." All I got back was static and that clicking sound, louder now. I followed the trail for another quarter mile before I found Roy's rifle. It was hanging 20 feet up in an old oak tree, and the barrel was bent into a perfect spiral. Not broken or damaged, bent, like someone had twisted it like a piece of soft wire. The metal was cold to the touch, colder than the morning air around it. That's when I started to feel like something was watching me. You know that feeling when you're in the woods and you sense eyes on you? Usually it's just a deer or maybe a bear keeping its distance, but this felt different, like whatever was watching me wasn't quite animal and wasn't quite human. I found Earl Jameson 2 hours later. He was sitting against a tree about half a mile from where I'd found the rifle, just staring off into nothing. His eyes were open, but he didn't respond when I called his name. In his hands was a small cloth bag, and when I looked inside, I nearly dropped it. Human finger bones. Maybe a dozen of them, all different sizes, some yellow with age and others still white. "Earl, can you hear me?" I shook his shoulder gently. "Where are Roy and Pete?" He turned to look at me then, and his eyes were the eyes of someone who'd seen something that broke his mind. When he spoke, it wasn't in English. The words sounded Cherokee, but Earl didn't speak Cherokee. None of the Jameson family did. I managed to get him back to the station, but he wouldn't let go of that bag of bones. The doc who checked him out said Earl was in shock, maybe from hypothermia or dehydration. But I could see it was more than that. His teeth were loose in his mouth, like his bones were giving up. "He keeps saying the same thing over and over," the doctor told me. "Something about tall, pale things that click their teeth and wear faces like masks." That night, I went back up to the search area with my partner, Tommy Clearwater. Tommy was Cherokee, born and raised on the reservation before he became a ranger. If anyone would know what Earl was talking about, it would be him. My grandmother told Store, "East about the Nunahai," Tommy said as we hiked up the trail. "Spirit people who collect bones to rebuild the bodies they lost in the old times. When the soldiers came and killed whole villages, the spirits of the dead became something else, something hungry." I still thought we were dealing with people, maybe some kind of cult group playing games with Cherokee legends. That changed when we found Pete Hawkins. Pete was hanging in a tree like a scarecrow, about 50 yards from where we'd found Earl. But when we cut him down and examined the body, we realized something impossible had happened. All his bones were gone. Every single one. His skin and muscles were intact, but inside was just empty space. Like someone had reached inside and carefully removed his entire skeleton without damaging anything else. "This isn't possible," I said, but Tommy was backing away from the body, his face white. "We need to leave," he whispered. "We need to leave right now." That's when we heard the clicking. It started soft, like someone tapping two sticks together, but then more clicking joined in from different directions. Ahead of us, behind us, to both sides. We were surrounded by things that were moving through the trees, making that sound. I drew my sidearm and tried the radio again. Dead static, just like before. "They're triangulating us," Tommy said. "Herding us towards something." The clicking got louder, and I caught my first glimpse of what was making the sound. It moved between two pine trees about 30 yards away, tall, pale, and wrong. Its arms were too long, its legs bent at angles that didn't match human joints. When it moved, it flowed like water, but I could hear bones clicking against each other inside its body. "Don't run," Tommy whispered. "If you run, it'll chase you, and it's faster than anything you've ever seen." But staying still felt like the worst idea in the world. The temperature was dropping fast, and the fog was rolling in thick despite the clear sky above. My breath was coming out in clouds, and I could feel something drawing the heat right out of my bones. We backed toward the trail, moving slow and careful. The clicking followed us, always just out of sight, but close enough that I could hear individual creatures moving on both sides. There had to be at least 4 of them, maybe more. That's when Tommy made his mistake. He stepped on a branch, and it snapped loud enough to echo through the forest. The clicking stopped. Everything went silent for maybe 10 seconds, and then I heard something moving fast through the trees. Tommy started to run, and I followed him. We crashed through the underbrush while something pale and spider-like kept pace with us, moving through the canopy above our heads. "The old burial ground," Tommy gasped as we ran. "If we can reach the sacred ground, they can't follow." I looked back once and saw it clearly. 8 feet tall, bone white with hollow eye sockets and fingers that ended in sharp bone spurs. It was keeping up with us easily, moving from tree to tree like gravity didn't matter to it. We reached a clearing where ancient Cherokee stones marked old graves. Tommy collapsed against one of the stone markers, breathing hard. "Here," he said. "They can't cross onto sacred ground." But he was wrong. The thing came into the clearing like smoke, flowing around the sacred stones like they weren't even there. When it reached Tommy, it placed one bone-white hand on his chest, and I watched his face change. Tommy started screaming, but it wasn't a normal scream. It was the sound of bones growing and breaking and growing again. His shirt tore as his ribcage expanded, then contracted, then expanded again. Bone spurs started pushing through his skin, and his spine curved and twisted as the thing reshaped his skeleton from the inside. I ran. I made it maybe 100 yards before I realized the creature wasn't chasing me anymore. When I looked back, Tommy was still standing in teeth. He clearing, but he wasn't Tommy anymore. His bones had grown through his skin in sharp white spikes, and his head was tilted at an angle that should have been impossible for a living person. The thing that had killed him was gone. I stumbled through the forest for what felt like hours, trying to get back to the trail. My radio was completely dead, and my compass was spinning in circles. Every direction looked the same, and the fog was so thick I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. That's when I started finding the bone arrangements. They were everywhere, circles of human bones, spirals of finger bones, neat rows of teeth arranged like corn kernels. Some of the bones were old and yellow, but others were fresh. I recognized Roy Jamison's wedding ring on a finger bone near the base of a tree. The things weren't just killing people. They were collecting them, arranging them, building something out of the pieces. I heard the clicking again, closer this time, and then I understood what Earl had been trying to tell us. The creatures didn't just click their teeth. They wore faces like masks, human faces, stretched over their own bone-white skulls. One of them stepped out from behind a tree, and it was wearing Tommy's face. "Jackson," it said in Tommy's voice, but the words clicked and rattled like bones falling down a well. "Don't run from us. We're just trying to rebuild what was taken." I shot at it, and the bullet passed right through its chest without slowing it down. It reached toward me with fingers that were too long, tipped with bone spurs that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. "All those Cherokee bodies in the ground," it clicked. "All those warriors killed by soldiers. We need bones to bring them back. Your bones are strong, Ranger. Mountain bones. They'll do nicely." I felt something happening inside my chest, a pulling sensation, like my ribs were trying to expand. The creature was doing something to my calcium, making my bones grow and shift inside my body. I stumbled backward and tripped over something. When I looked down, I saw I'd fallen into one of the bone circles. The creature stopped at the edge of the circle and tilted its head. "You're in the sacred space now," it said. "The old rules apply here. We can't take you while you're in the circle." But I could feel my bones still changing, getting heavier and more brittle. My fingers were starting to hurt where new bone was trying to push through the skin. "The arrangement isn't complete yet," the creature said. "But when the moon rises full again, we'll have enough bones to bring back the whole village. And then we'll start on the next village, and the next." I realized the only way out was to destroy the bone arrangements. If they were using the bones to rebuild Cherokee warriors, then scattering the bones might break whatever ritual they were performing. While the creature waited at the edge of the circle, I started kicking apart the bone arrangements around me. Every bone I scattered seemed to make the creature more agitated. It started clicking faster, and I could hear other creatures responding from deeper in the forest. "You don't understand," it said, and for a moment Tommy's face looked almost sad. "We were murdered. Our children were murdered. All we want is to come home." But I kept scattering bones, and the creature began to fade like smoke. As it disappeared, I felt the pulling sensation in my chest stop, though my bones still ached like they'd been stretched. I made it back to the ranger station just before dawn. The bone arrangements were gone when the search and rescue teams went back up the mountain, and they found Tommy's body near a rock slide that looked like it had happened recently. The official cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma from falling rocks. Pete Hawkins was found at the bottom of a cliff, and they said a bear had gotten to him before he fell. Earl Jamison was transferred to a psychiatric facility in Nashville, where he spent the rest of his life speaking Cherokee words that the tribal elders said weren't from any dialect they knew. I never found Roy's body. The doctors say I have a condition like osteoporosis now. My bones are weak and brittle, especially during full moons. Some nights, I can still feel that pulling sensation in my chest, like something far away is trying to call my calcium back to the mountain. Mary knows something happened up there that changed me, but she doesn't ask questions. She just makes sure I take my calcium supplements and doesn't complain when I wake up screaming from dreams about clicking sounds. I still work as a ranger, but I don't go up to Devil's Backbone anymore. Other rangers handle that section, and I've noticed the missing persons reports from that area have been increasing every hunting season. Always experienced hunters, always groups of 2 or 3, always near the old Cherokee burial grounds. Sometimes hikers find small arrangements of animal bones in perfect circles, and they think it's just kids playing games. I tell them to leave the bones alone and stay on the marked trails, but I can't tell them why. Who would believe me? The Cherokee elders I've talked to say the Nunahai are patient. They've been collecting bones for over a century now, rebuilding their people one skeleton at a time. They say the arrangements aren't random. They're maps showing where the old villages used to be before the soldiers came. And they say when the bone collectors have enough pieces, when they've rebuilt enough of their people, they'll start expanding beyond the mountains, beyond Tennessee, beyond the places where Cherokee blood was spilled. I don't know if that's true or not. All I know is that every full moon, I feel that pulling in my bones. And I remember Tommy's face stretched over something that wasn't human. I remember the sound of clicking teeth in the darkness. And I wonder how many more hunters are going to disappear before someone believes me. So I'm telling you this story now, hoping someone will listen. If you ever find yourself in the Great Smoky Mountains, if you ever see small bones arranged in circles or hear clicking sounds from the forest, don't investigate. Don't touch the bones. Don't try to help. Just run and don't look back. Because the bone collectors are always hungry and they're always patient and they remember every single person who was taken from them in the old times, and they're coming to collect what they're owed. My name is Margaret Bramwell, but everyone calls me Maggie. I've been a ranger in the Chattahoochee National Forest for 6 years now, and I've seen plenty of things that would make city folks lose sleep. Bears breaking into campsites, hikers falling off cliffs, and more than a few people who wandered off the trail and never came back. But I can handle those things. They make sense. What happened last August on Blood Mountain didn't make sense at all. I used to be a cop in Atlanta. Spent 3 years walking beats where gunshots were background music and finding bodies was just part of the job. I thought I was tough. I thought I'd seen the worst that people could do to each other. But after my third drug dealer got shot in front of his 5-year-old daughter, I couldn't take it anymore. The mountains called to me like a promise of something clean and simple. Blood Mountain is the highest peak in Georgia at 4,458 feet. It sits right where the Appalachian Trail cuts through our forest, which means we get hikers from all over the country passing through. Most of them are good people just trying to connect with nature. Some of them are running from something like I was, and some of them never make it home. The Cherokee used to tell stories about things that lived up there, skin dancers, they called them, creatures that could steal the shape of a person and wear it like clothes. The old-timers in town still whisper about it sometimes, but I always figured it was just mountain folklore. People make up stories to explain things they don't understand. I was wrong about that. It started during the worst heat wave I'd ever seen. August 15th, 1979. The temperature hit 97 degrees, which doesn't sound like much until you're hiking up a mountain with 40 pounds of gear on your back. The whole forest felt wrong. Animals were acting strange, bears coming down. To lower elevations, birds flying in circles, dogs in town howling all night long. Even the trees seemed stressed, their leaves curling up like they were trying to hide from something. That's when David Chen went missing. David was 24 from North Carolina. He'd been hiking the Appalachian Trail for 2 weeks and knew what he was doing. His gear was good, his permits were in order, and he'd checked in at every station like he was supposed to. Then he just vanished somewhere between Neal's Gap and the Blood Mountain shelter. His hiking buddies called it in on August 16th. They said they'd seen him the night before, but something was off. He seemed different. Walked funny, like his boots didn't fit right. When they tried to talk to him, he gave short answers that didn't sound like him at all. "It was weird," said Tom, one of the other hikers. "David's always been chatty, loves to talk about the trail, the views, whatever. But that night he just stared at us, and his eyes, I swear his eyes looked different, greener." I found David's backpack the next morning, about a quarter mile off the main trail. Everything was there: his sleeping bag, his food, his water purification tablets, everything except his driver's license and the photos from his wallet. Just those two things, gone. The footprints around his campsite told a strange story. David's boot prints were there, but they looked wrong somehow. The weight distribution was off, like whoever was wearing them had feet that were the wrong shape, and there were signs of a struggle, but no blood, no torn clothing, just those weird footprints leading deeper into the woods. That should have been my first clue that something was very wrong. The search started at dawn on August 17th. We had 12 people spread across a 2-mile grid, all experienced in mountain rescue. I took the eastern section, following D. Avid's trail deeper into the forest. The heat was already building, and the air felt thick and wrong, like breathing through wet cloth. About 2 hours in, my radio crackled to life. "Base, this is Jim. I've got eyes on our missing hiker." My heart jumped. "Location, Jim?" "About half a mile north of Slaughter Creek. He's walking south on the trail, seems to be okay." I changed direction and headed for Jim's position. But before I got there, another call came through. "Base, this is Sarah. I'm looking at David Chen right now. He's sitting by the stream at Lance Creek, about a mile west of my last position." I stopped dead in my tracks. Lance Creek was 3 miles from Slaughter Creek. No way David could be in both places at once. "Jim, Sarah, can you confirm your sightings? Describe what you see." Jim's voice came back first. "Definitely our guy, about 6 feet tall, dark hair, wearing the blue jacket from his description. But he won't respond when I call to him. Just keeps walking." "Same here," Sarah said. "Right height, right clothes. But something's off about the way he moves, like he's not used to his own body." I felt cold despite the heat. "Both of you, do not approach. Keep visual contact and wait for backup." But by the time I reached Jim's position, David was gone. Sarah reported the same thing. 1 minute he was there, the next he'd vanished into the trees without a sound. That's when the radio calls started. The first one came through at 11:47 a.m. Clear as day, David's voice calling for help. He sounded scared, hurt, like he was lost and running out of water. The signal was coming from the north side of Blood Mountain. 15 minutes later, another call. Same voice, same words, but this time from the south side. Then another from the east. All identical, like someone was playing the same recording from different locations. By evening, we'd received 7 identical distress calls from David Chen, each one from a different mountain peak within a 20-mile radius. Each time we sent teams to investigate, they found nothing but empty forest, hat night. I sat in my truck reviewing the day's reports. None of it made sense. How could multiple people see the same man in different places? How could his voice be calling from mountaintops that would take hours to reach? I was about to head home when I saw him. David Chen, walking down the trail toward my truck. Same blue jacket, same dark hair, same height. He moved with a slight limp, favoring his left leg. When he got close enough, I could see that his face was scratched, like he'd been pushing through thick brush. I got out of the truck and walked toward him. "David? David Chen?" He stopped and looked at me. His eyes were the wrong color. Tom had been right. They were green now, not brown, like in his driver's license photo. But that wasn't what made my skin crawl. It was the way he smiled. "Hello, Maggie," he said, and his voice was exactly right. "I've been looking for you." The problem was I'd never told him my name. And I was wearing my ranger uniform with M. Bramwell on the name tag, not Maggie. The only people who called me Maggie were my family and close friends. "How do you know my name?" I asked, my hand moving instinctively toward my radio. His smile got wider, showing too many teeth. "Your mother told me. She says you worry too much. Always have, Ever since your father died in that car accident when you were 16, I felt like someone had poured ice water into my veins. My father had died when I was 16, but I'd never told anyone the details. Certainly not a stranger from North Carolina. She misses you, David continued, tilting his head like a curious bird. Says you don't visit enough since you moved up here. Says she understands why you had to leave Atlanta after what happened to little Maria Rodriguez. Maria Rodriguez was the 5-year-old who'd watched her father die. I'd never spoken that name out loud to anyone. It was in police reports, but those were sealed. The only way someone could know that name was if they'd been there or if they'd been inside my head. I backed toward my truck, keeping my eyes on David, or the thing that looked like David. "Who are you?" I whispered. He laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "I'm David Chen, Maggie. Can't you see? I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be." But as he spoke, I noticed something horrible. His face kept shifting, just slightly, like a mask that didn't quite fit right. The angle of his jaw would change between words. His nose would be a little longer, then shorter. His eyes would go from green to brown and back again. I reached for my radio, but David moved faster than any human should be able to move. 1 second he was 10 feet away, the next he was right in front of me, his hand covering mine. His skin felt wrong. Too hot, too soft, like it might slide right off if I grabbed it. "Don't call for help, Maggie," he said softly. "We're just getting to know each other." I jerked my hand away and ran for the truck. When I looked back, David was gone. But I could hear him laughing from somewhere in the trees, and the sound seemed to come from all directions at once. That night, I didn't sleep at all. The next morning brought terrible news. Jennifer Walsh, a 26-year-old teacher from Tennessee, had been reported missing by her hiking partner. She'd last been seen talking to a man matching David Chen's description near the Blood Mountain shelter. "He seemed friendly enough," said Katie, Jennifer's hiking partner. "Knew all about the trail, talked about places they'd both been. Jenny felt comfortable with him. They walked ahead together while I stopped to filter water." "When did you realize something was wrong?" I asked. Katie's hands shook as she poured coffee from her camp stove. "About an hour later, I caught up to them. They were standing by this big rock formation, not talking, just standing there. When I called out, Jenny turned around and waved, but something was wrong with her face." "Wrong how?" "Like she was wearing a mask of herself. Her smile was too wide, and her eyes didn't match her expression. And the man, he was gone. Just vanished between the time I called out and when I reached them." "What did Jennifer say when you asked her about him?" Katie's voice dropped to a whisper. "That's the thing. She said she'd been alone the whole time. Swore up and down that no one had been with her. But I saw them together, talking and laughing. I saw him clear as day." I organized another search, but this time I brought backup from the county sheriff's office. We found Jennifer's campsite around noon, and what we discovered there made my blood run cold. Her tent was set up perfectly, sleeping bag laid out, food properly stored in a bare canister. No signs of struggle, no torn fabric, no scattered belongings. But there was blood. Not much, just a few drops on the ground outside her tent. I collected samples for testing, but even before the results came back, I knew what we'd find. The lab confirmed it 3 days later. 2 different DNA profiles in the same blood drops. Jennifer's blood and someone else's mixed together like they'd come from the same wound. That's when the sightings started. Over the next 2 days, hikers reported seeing David and Jennifer together all over the mountain, always at a distance, always just out of calling range. They'd wave when people spotted them, but if anyone tried to approach, they'd disappear into the trees. But the descriptions were all wrong. The David they saw was sometimes taller, sometimes shorter. His hair changed color between sightings. Jennifer's clothes were different every time. Sometimes her hiking outfit, sometimes a dress that no one packs for backpacking. "It's like they're playing dress-up," one hiker told me, "like kids trying on their parents' clothes." The Cherokee elder I consulted didn't seem surprised by any of this. Thomas Crowfeather was 73 years old and had lived in these mountains his whole life. His grandfather had told him the old stories, and his grandfather's grandfather before that. When I described what we were seeing, he just nodded like he'd been expecting this conversation. "Skin dancers," he said, sitting on his porch and looking up toward Blood Mountain. "Haven't been active for maybe 50 years, but they never really go away. They sleep until something wakes them up." What wakes them up? Pain, suffering, fear. They feed on it, grow stronger from it. This heat, all the stress in the forest, the animals acting strange, it's like ringing a dinner bell for them. What exactly are they? Thomas was quiet for a long time, staring at the mountain peaks. Spirits that got lost between life and death. They want to be human again, but they've forgotten how. So they take human shapes and wear them like clothes. But they can't get it quite right. Always something off about them. How do you stop them? You don't stop them. You survive them. They're hunters, and they'll keep hunting until they get what they want or until they find easier prey. What do they want? Thomas looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. To be you, completely. Not just your shape, but your memories, your life, your place in the world. They're trying to steal their way back into existence. That night I found Jennifer. I was doing a final patrol around the Blood Mountain shelter when I heard crying, soft, muffled sobs coming from behind a stand of pine trees. I followed the sound and found her sitting against a large boulder, knees drawn up to her chest. "Jennifer? Jennifer Walsh?" She looked up at me, and her face was streaked with tears. She looked exactly like her driver's license photo. Blonde hair, blue eyes, small scar on her chin from a childhood accident. "Oh, thank God," she sobbed. "I've been lost for days. I can't find my friend Katie, and there's something following me. Something that looks like people I know." Every instinct told me to be careful, but she seemed so genuinely frightened. She knew details about her hike, about Katie, about her life back in Tennessee. When I asked her questions that only the real Jennifer would know, she answered them correctly. But when I looked closely, I could see what Katie had meant. Something was wrong with her face. The features were all correct, but they didn't quite line up right, like a photograph that had been cut into pieces and glued back together by someone who'd never seen the original. "Jennifer, I need you to come with me. We'll get you medical attention and contact Katie." She stood up, and that's when I saw the back of her shirt. It was soaked with blood from her shoulder blades down to her waist. Fresh blood, still wet. "Jennifer, you're hurt. We need to get you to a hospital." She looked confused, like she didn't know what I was talking about. "Hurt? I feel fine." I moved around behind her to examine the wound, and that's when I saw it. The blood wasn't coming from a wound. It was seeping through her shirt from underneath, like whatever was inside Jennifer's skin was bleeding. "Who are you?" I whispered. She turned around, and her face had changed completely. The features were shifting, rearranging themselves like wet clay. For just a moment I saw something underneath. Raw muscle and sinew, no skin at all, just meat held together by will and hunger. "I'm learning," she said in Jennifer's voice. "But it's so hard to keep all the pieces in the right places." I ran. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck, and I didn't stop driving until I was back at the ranger station. I locked the doors, turned on every light, and called for backup from the state police. But when I tried to explain what I'd seen, the words sounded crazy even to me. The thing wearing Jennifer's shape followed me. I saw it through the station windows around midnight, standing at the edge of the parking lot. It had gotten better at maintaining the disguise, but I could still see the wrongness in the way it moved. Too fluid, like its joints bent in directions they shouldn't. It didn't try to get inside, it just stood there, watching, learning. I could feel it studying me through the glass, memorizing every detail of my face and posture. Around 2 a.m. my phone rang. My mother's number. "Maggie, honey, is that you?" "Mom? What are you doing up so late?" "I had the strangest dream about you. You were in trouble, lost in the woods. There was a young man trying to help you, but something was wrong with him. My blood went cold. My mother had Alzheimer's. She barely remembered my name most days, let alone had coherent dreams about my life. Mom, how did you know I was in the woods? The young man told me. He's standing right here in my living room. Says he knows you from work. I dropped the phone and grabbed my keys. My mother lived 20 minutes away in a small house near Dahlonega. If that thing had gotten to her. I broke every speed limit getting there. Her front door was standing open and all the lights were on. I found her in the living room, sitting in her favorite chair with a cup of tea that was still steaming. Mom, are you okay? Where's the man who was here? She looked confused like she usually did. Man? I don't remember any man, honey. Did you come to visit? That's nice. I searched the house, but we were alone. No signs of forced entry, nothing disturbed. But on the coffee table next to my mother's tea was a photograph I'd never seen before. It showed me in my ranger uniform, but I was standing next to David Chen. We had our arms around each other like old friends, both of us smiling at the camera. The photo was impossible. I'd never met David Chen before he went missing. But there we were, looking happy and familiar with each other. And in the background, barely visible, was the thing wearing Jennifer's face, watching us from behind a tree. I grabbed the photo and my mother and drove straight to the sheriff's office. We spent the night there, but it didn't matter. The thing had what it wanted, more information about me, my family, my life. The next morning, I went back to Blood Mountain alone. I found the real Jennifer Walsh's body in a cave about 2 miles from the trail. She'd been dead for days, her skin removed in precise ritual cuts, but her muscles and organs were untouched, preserved somehow. Like the thing that killed her, only needed the outside. David's body was there too, in the same condition. Both of them looked peaceful, like they'd simply gone to sleep and never woken up. I was photographing the scene when I heard footsteps behind me. Hello, Maggie. I turned around, and David Chen was standing at the cave entrance. But this wasn't the clumsy imitation I'd encountered before. This version looked perfect. Right height, right build, eyes the correct brown color. He even had the small scar on his left hand from a childhood accident that I'd read about in his missing person report. I've been practicing, he said with David's voice. Learning how to be human. You've been very helpful with that. I'm not helping you with anything. But you have. Every time you ran, every time you showed fear, you taught me how humans react to danger. Every question you asked taught me what humans need to know to trust each other. He stepped closer, and I could see that he was wearing David's actual clothes. The blue jacket, the hiking boots, even David's watch. I've decided I like being David. He had such a simple life, such clear goals, hike the trail, see the country, meet people. I can do all of those things now. What are you really? His form shimmered for a moment, and I caught a glimpse of what lay underneath. It wasn't entirely human, but it wasn't entirely animal either. Something caught between forms, hungry for an identity that would stick. I'm what remains when someone dies. Police alone and forgotten. I'm the echo that refuses to fade. But I'm tired of being nothing, Maggie. I want to be someone. You can't just steal someone's life, can't I? He smiled with David's face. I have his memories now, his personality, his relationships. If I go back to North Carolina and visit his parents, they'll never know the difference. I've become more David than David ever was. That's when I understood the real horror. This thing didn't just kill people. It replaced them. Perfectly. It could walk back into David's life, and no one would ever know he was gone. But there's still one problem, the thing continued. You know the truth. You've seen behind the mask. That makes you dangerous. I pulled out my service weapon, but it laughed. Bullets won't stop me, Maggie. I'm not really alive in any way you'd understand. Maybe not, I said, backing toward my emergency pack. But I bet fire will slow you down. I grabbed an emergency flare from my belt and pulled the cap. The bright red flame illuminated the cave, and the thing that looked like David stepped back with genuine fear in its stolen eyes. "You're right about one thing," I said, advancing with the flare. "I do know the truth, but that doesn't make me dangerous to you." "What do you mean?" "It makes me dangerous to everyone else, because now I know that any of us could be one of you, and I'll never be able to trust a human face again." The thing's stolen face showed confusion, then understanding, then something that might have been satisfaction. "You're learning too," it said. "Good. That will make you stronger when I'm done wearing your skin." It lunged at me with inhuman speed, but I was ready. The flare caught its stolen clothing, and the fire spread faster than it should have. The thing shrieked with David's voice, but the sound was all wrong, too high, too long, like a recording played at the wrong speed. It retreated toward the cave entrance, its form beginning to smoke and blur. Before it escaped, it turned back to me one last time. "This isn't over, Maggie. I know where it. You live now. I know where your mother lives. I know everything about you." Then it was gone, leaving only the smell of burning hair and the echo of its terrible promise. The official reports listed David Chen and Jennifer Walsh as victims of bear attacks. The State Wildlife Office investigated and found evidence of unusual bear activity in the area, though they couldn't explain why the bodies had been so precisely mutilated. The case was closed within a week. I never told anyone the complete truth about what happened on Blood Mountain. Who would believe it? Even now, 6 months later, I have trouble believing it myself. But I still have that impossible photograph of me and David Chen, and sometimes I catch myself staring at it, wondering if my memory of events is as reliable as I think it is. The thing got away that day in the cave, but it didn't disappear completely. Over the following weeks, hikers reported strange encounters all along the Appalachian Trail, people seeing familiar faces in impossible places. Loved ones who acted slightly wrong, said things they shouldn't know, moved in ways that didn't quite match their personalities. I tried to warn people, but how do you tell someone to be suspicious of their own family? How do you explain that the person sleeping next to them might not be who they appear to be? The hardest part is the doubt. Every day, I look at the people around me and wonder if they're real. My fellow rangers, the hikers I help, even my own mother, how can I be sure any of them are who they claim to be? The thing that stole David's shape knew details about my life that only someone very close to me could know, which means either it can read minds or it's been watching me much longer than I realized. Sometimes I catch my mother looking at me strangely, like she's trying to remember something important. Her Alzheimer's makes it hard to tell if it's the disease talking or if something else is looking out through her eyes. Last week, she mentioned a conversation we'd had about my father's death, but I'd never told her the details. She somehow knew. I still patrol Blood Mountain, but I'm not the same ranger I used to be. I question everything now. When hikers tell me they've seen missing people, I believe them. When they report strange behavior from their companions, I take it seriously. The other rangers think I'm developing paranoia from too much time alone in the woods. Maybe they're right. Maybe the stress of finding those bodies broke something in my mind, and I'm seeing monsters where none exist. That would be the rational explanation, the one that makes sense. But every night when I lock my doors and check my windows, I remember the feeling of that thing's stolen skin under my hand. I remember the way David's face shifted and moved like a mask that didn't quite fit. I remember the hunger in its eyes when it talked about stealing my life. The Cherokee elder, Thomas Crow Feather, told me that skin dancers never really die. They just sleep until something wakes them up again. The heat wave passed and the forest has returned to normal. The animals aren't acting strange anymore, and hikers report fewer unusual encounters. But I know it's still out there somewhere, wearing someone's stolen face, practicing how to be human, learning from its mistakes, getting better at the disguise. Maybe it's given up on me and found easier prey. Maybe it's patient enough to wait years before trying again. Or maybe it's already succeeded, and the person writing this story isn't really Maggie Bramwell at all. The thought keeps me awake at night. staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, looking for signs that my face doesn't quite fit right, checking my memories to make sure they're all still mine, wondering if the real Maggie is buried somewhere in a cave on Blood Mountain, while something else walks around in her ranger uniform, wearing her name tag, living her life. If you're reading this and you're planning to hike the Appalachian Trail, be careful who you trust. Look closely at the people around you. Ask them questions only they would know the answers to. And if something feels wrong, if someone's smile is too wide or their eyes are the wrong color or they know things they shouldn't know, run. Run fast and don't look back. Because somewhere in these mountains, something is still learning how to be human, and it's getting very, very good at it. This account was found among the personal effects of Margaret Bramwell following her disappearance during a routine patrol of Blood Mountain in March 1980. Park Service records show that Ranger Bramwell submitted her final report on March 15th and failed to return from her patrol that evening. Her truck was found abandoned at the Neels Gap trailhead, with no signs of struggle. The search for Ranger Bramwell was called off after 2 weeks when no trace of her could be found. Hikers continue to report seeing a woman matching Bramwell's description throughout the Chattahoochee National Forest, though these sightings are typically dismissed as cases of mistaken identity. The Cherokee elder Thomas Crow Feather, mentioned in Bramwell's account, died of natural causes in 1981. His final words, according to his family, were, "She's still learning, but she's getting much better at it." My name is Bobby Hollister, and I've been a park ranger for 9 years. I work at Jefferson National Forest in Virginia, where the Blue Ridge Mountains stretch out like sleeping giants covered in green. My job is simple: keep people safe, especially kids. I run all the youth programs here, teaching families how to camp safely and showing children how to respect nature. People call me the Kid Ranger because I spend most of my time with families. I love that work. Maybe it's because I lost my little sister Sarah when I was 12. She drowned in a river while we were playing, and I couldn't save her. That day changed everything for me. I promised myself I'd never let another child get hurt if I could stop it. I'm good at my job, real good. In the past 5 years, we've cut child accidents by 80%. I know every dangerous spot in these mountains, every loose rock and hidden drop-off. I teach kids to stay with adults, never wander alone, and always tell someone where they're going. That's why I don't believe in ghost stories. The mountains are full of real dangers. Bears, cliffs, sudden storms that can kill you in minutes. I don't have time for made-up scares when there are plenty of real ones. When old-timers tell stories about ghost children around Raven Rock, I just shake my head. Parents have enough to worry about without supernatural nonsense. Raven Rock sits high up at 3,600 feet, where the wind cuts through pine trees like a knife. It's beautiful, but dangerous, with rocky cliffs that drop straight down into nothing. The area has a sad history. Back in 1887, there was a children's home up here. 47 kids died in a fire that winter. The locals say you can still hear them crying sometimes, especially when the wind picks up. I've camped at Raven Rock hundreds of times. Never heard anything but wind and wildlife. October is my favorite time of year. Here, the leaves turn red and gold and families come from all over to see the colors. The nights get cold enough that you need a good fire, but the days are perfect for hiking. This October started like any other. Then the Henderson family came to my ranger station on a Tuesday morning. "Ranger Hollister," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice shaky. "We need to talk about our daughter Emma." Emma was 6, with blonde pigtails and bright blue eyes. She hung behind her parents, quiet and pale. Usually, kids her age are bouncing off the walls when they visit the ranger station, excited to see my badge and radio. "What's wrong?" I asked, kneeling down to Emma's level. "She's been talking to imaginary friends," Mr. Henderson said. "But the things she knows, they're not normal." Emma whispered something I couldn't hear. "What did you say, sweetheart?" I asked gently. "The children say their names are Mary and Thomas and Little Joe," Emma said in a tiny voice. "They lived in the big house before the fire. Mary was 7 and Thomas was 9 and Little Joe was only 4. I felt cold fingers walk up my spine. Those were real names from the 1887 records. Names a 6-year-old couldn't possibly know. Where did you hear those names, Emma? They told me. They want me to come play with them tonight. They said they know the best hiding spots. The Hendersons looked at me with worried eyes. She's never been interested in history, Mrs. Henderson said. We didn't even tell her about the old children's home. I spent an hour with them, explaining how kids sometimes pick up stories from other campers. I suggested they keep Emma close at night and maybe move to a different campsite. But as they left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was really wrong. That night, I got 2 more reports. The Thompsons' 7-year-old son, Marcus, was found sleepwalking toward the cliff edge at 2 a.m. The Kims' 8-year-old daughter, Sarah, kept talking to empty spaces, describing in detail how smoke filled the old children's home and how scared the kids were. All 3 families were camping in different spots around Raven Rock. All 3 children were describing the same historical events they had no way of knowing about. I radioed my supervisor in the morning. Jim, we might have a problem at Raven Rock, I said. What kind of problem? The kind that makes good families pack up and leave bad reviews. He laughed. Ghost stories again? Bobby, you know better. I know, but 3 different kids are showing the same strange behavior. I want to camp up there tonight. Keep an eye on things. Your call. Just don't let this turn into a circus. As I packed my gear, I told myself I was being smart, not superstitious. Something was affecting these children, and I needed to figure out what. Maybe it was gas leaking from an old mine shaft, or some kind of mold in the area. There had to be a logical explanation. I'd spent my career protecting kids from real dangers. I wasn't about to start believing in ghosts now. But that evening, as I hiked up to Raven Rock with my backpack and radio, I couldn't stop thinking about Emma's pale face and tiny voice describing children who died over 100 years ago. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting everything blood red. The wind picked up, making the pine trees whisper like voices in the dark. For the first time in 9 years, I felt afraid in my own forest. I set up my tent in the main camping area just as the last light faded from the sky. 5 families were camping at Raven Rock that night. The Hendersons, Thompsons, and Kims, plus the Rodriguez family, and a couple with teenage kids named the Blacks. I made my rounds, checking in with everyone and reminding them about fire safety. Everything seemed normal. Kids were roasting marshmallows. Parents were setting up sleeping bags. Teenagers were complaining about no cell service. Just another October night in the mountains. I was drinking coffee by my campfire around 10 p.m. when I heard it. Singing. It was faint, carried on the wind, but clear enough to make out. Children's voices singing a lullaby I didn't recognize. The melody was old-fashioned, like something from a church hymnal. I grabbed my flashlight and walked toward the sound. It seemed to come from the direction of the old children's home ruins, about a quarter mile through the trees. But as I got closer, the singing stopped. I stood in the darkness, listening. Nothing but wind in the pines. Probably just the teenagers, I muttered. But I knew it wasn't true. The voices had been too young, too many of them, and the Black family's kids were still sitting around their campfire. I was walking back when I heard Mrs. Kim scream. I ran toward their tent, my radio crackling as I called it in. Base, this is Hollister, possible emergency at Campsite 7. The whole Kim family was outside their tent in pajamas. Mrs. Kim was holding 8-year-old Sarah tight while Mr. Kim shined a flashlight around their campsite. What happened? I asked. Sarah walked right out of the tent, Mr. Kim said, his voice shaking. She was asleep, but her eyes were open. She walked straight toward the cliff. How far did she get? 20 feet from the edge before we caught her, Mrs. Kim said. She kept saying, "They're waiting for me. They're waiting for me." I knelt down next to Sarah. Her eyes were wide and frightened now, but she seemed fully awake. Sarah, who was waiting for you? The children from the old house, she whispered. They said they wanted to show me where they used to play hide and seek. They said it was safe. Can you see them now? She looked around the darkness and shook her head. They only come when it's really dark, and they're sad. Really, really sad. I helped the Kims move their sleeping bags into their car for the night. Sarah's sleepwalking could have killed her. That cliff dropped 200 feet straight down onto rocks. As I was heading back to my tent, I heard Marcus Thompson calling my name. "Ranger Bobby! Ranger Bobby, come quick!" I found 7-year-old Marcus standing in his family's campsite, pointing toward the tree line. His parents were trying to calm him down. "There," Marcus said. "Do you see them? They're playing tag." I looked where he pointed and saw nothing but black trees. "Marcus, there's nobody there," his father said. "Yes, there is. There's Mary and Thomas and little Joe and lots of others. They're wearing old-timey clothes, and they keep waving at me." The same names Emma Henderson had mentioned. I felt that cold feeling in my stomach again. "Marcus," I said gently, "what do these children look like?" "Some of them are burned," he said matter-of-factly. "Their clothes are all black and smoky, but they're still kids, so it's okay. They want me to come play, but Mom and Dad won't let me." Mrs. Thompson looked at me with panic in her eyes. "Should we take him to a doctor?" "Let's wait until morning," I said, though I wasn't sure why. Something told me a doctor wouldn't find anything wrong with Marcus. I radioed base again, but Jim had gone home for the night. The night dispatcher, Marie, answered. "Marie, I need you to look up something for me. The 1887 fire at the Raven Rock Children's Home. I need the names of the victims." "Bobby, what are you doing up there?" "Just humor me." 10 minutes later, she radioed back. "Okay, this is weird. I found an old newspaper article. 47 children died. The youngest was Joseph Carter, age 4. They called him Little Joe." My blood went cold. "What about Mary and Thomas?" "Mary Sullivan, age 7, and Thomas Mitchell, age 9. "Bobby, how did you know those names?" I looked around the campsite. 3 different children had mentioned the same names. Children who died over a century ago. Children they had no way of knowing about. "I'll call you back," I said. I decided to stay awake all night, keeping watch. I built up my fire and settled in with hot coffee and my radio. If kids were going to sleepwalk toward cliffs, I wanted to be ready. Around midnight, the temperature dropped fast. My breath started showing in the air, even though it had been warm all day. The kind of sudden cold that doesn't make sense. That's when I saw the first one. A little girl in a long white nightgown, standing at the edge of my firelight. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, with dark hair and pale skin. She was staring at me with big, sad eyes. I blinked hard, sure I was seeing things. When I looked again, she was gone. "Hello?" I called softly. "Is someone there?" Silence. I grabbed my flashlight and swept it around the campsite. Nothing. But the cold was getting worse and my fire was burning lower, even though I'd just added wood. Then I heard footsteps in the leaves behind me. I spun around and saw him. A boy, about 9 years old in old-fashioned clothes, standing 20 feet away. His face was pale and his clothes looked singed, like he'd been in a fire. "Thomas?" I whispered. The boy nodded slowly. Then he pointed toward the cliff and mouthed one word. "Help." Before I could move, he faded away like smoke. I sat by my dying fire, shaking and not from the cold. For 31 years, I'd believed in facts and logic and things I could touch. But I'd just seen a dead child asking for help, and somewhere in the darkness around me, I could hear the sound of children crying. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Thomas pointing toward the cliff. By dawn, my fire had died to cold ashes and frost covered everything, even though the weather forecast had called for warm October nights. The families started stirring around 7 a.m. I made my rounds again, checking on everyone. All 3 affected children looked tired and pale, like they hadn't slept either. "Did you hear the crying last night, Em?" Ma Henderson asked me as I walked past their tent. "What crying, sweetie?" "The children. They were crying because they can't find their way home. They've been lost for a really long time." Mrs. Henderson looked at me with worried eyes. She was awake most of the night, just staring at the tent wall and whispering to herself. That's when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. In the soft dirt around the campsites, there were footprints. Small ones, child-sized, but they didn't match any of the kids who were camping with us. These prints were everywhere, around the tents, leading toward the cliff, circling the dead fire pits. The strangest thing was that some of the prints looked old, like they'd been pressed into the dirt years ago, but others looked fresh from the night before. I followed one set of small prints away from the main camping area. They led into the woods, toward the ruins of the old children's home. I'd hiked this trail 100 times, but something felt different now. The trees seemed closer together, darker. Birds weren't singing. Even the squirrels were quiet. The ruins weren't much, just a stone foundation and a broken chimney covered in moss. But standing there, I felt sadness so heavy it made my chest hurt. I could almost hear echoes of children playing, laughing, calling to each other. Then I found the drawings. Someone had arranged dozens of rocks in patterns around the foundation. When I looked closer, I realized they were pictures made from stones, stick figures holding hands, a house with flames coming out the windows, children running. No way any of the camping families had done this. The rocks looked like they'd been arranged recently, but some of the moss growing around them suggested they'd been there much longer. I was studying the stone pictures when I heard Marcus Thompson scream. I ran back toward the campsite as fast as I could. I found the whole Thompson family standing around their tent, looking terrified. "He's gone," Mrs. Thompson said, tears running down her face. "Marcus is gone. What happened?" We're making breakfast," Mr. Thompson explained. "Marcus said he was going to use the bathroom. That was 20 minutes ago. We called and called, but he doesn't answer." I radioed for backup and started organizing a search. Within an hour, we had park rangers, local police, and volunteer firefighters combing every inch of Raven Rock. We searched the cliff areas first. That was always the biggest danger. But as we searched, I kept thinking about what Emma had said. The children were lost and couldn't find their way home. What if Marcus wasn't lost? What if he'd been taken? Around noon, we found his jacket hanging from a tree branch near the cliff edge. It was positioned carefully, like someone had placed it there on purpose. Below the tree, we found more of those small footprints in the dirt. Lots of them, like a group of children had been playing there. "Could be animal tracks," said Officer Martinez from the local police. But I knew better. I'd been tracking animals for 9 years. These were human footprints, made by bare feet, child-sized. While the search continued, I went back to check on the other families. Sarah Kim was sitting alone by her family's tent, drawing pictures with crayons. I sat down next to her. "What are you drawing, Sarah?" She held up her paper. It was a picture of children holding hands in a circle with a house burning behind them. In the corner, she'd drawn what looked like a cave. "Where did you see this?" I asked. The children showed me. They said this is where they play now, where the fire can't hurt them anymore. They said Marcus is there too, and he's not scared anymore. My radio crackled. "Bobby, we found something," came Jim's voice. I met the search team at the base of the cliff. They'd found a narrow opening in the rocks, barely wide enough for a child to squeeze through. Inside was a small cave that opened up into a larger space. "We can hear something in there," Jim said. "Sounds like a child crying." I grabbed a flashlight and rope. "I'm going in." The cave was tight and cold. I had to crawl on my belly for the first 20 feet. Then it opened up enough for me to stand. My flashlight beam showed a natural chamber about the size of a classroom. And there was Marcus. He was sitting in the far corner, wrapped in what looked like an old blanket. He was alive, but shivering, his lips blue from cold. When he saw my light, he smiled. "Ranger Bobby, I knew you'd find me." I rushed over and wrapped him in my jacket. "Marcus, how did you get down here?" "My friends brought me. They said this was their secret place where they could play without the fire hurting them, but it got really cold, and they had to go away when the sun came up." "What friends, Marcus?" "Thomas and Mary and little Joe and all the others. They were just like me, except they've been here a really long time. They said they were lonely." I got Marcus out of that cave and to the hospital. He was hypothermic, but okay. The doctor said he'd been in the cold for hours and was lucky to be alive. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what happened that evening after Marcus was safe. I was staying at Raven Rock again, determined to figure out what was really going on. This time, I wasn't alone. Officer Martinez had agreed to camp with me, and we'd convinced the remaining families to sleep in their cars. Around 10 p.m. we heard them. Children's voices, singing that same old lullaby I'd heard the night before. But this time, there were more voices, and they were louder. "You hear that?" Martinez asked. I nodded. At least I wasn't going crazy. We followed the sound toward the old children's home ruins. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, but the singing seemed to come from everywhere at once. When we reached the foundation, we saw them. Dozens of children, translucent and glowing faintly in the moonlight. They were holding hands in a circle around the stone foundation, singing. Some looked normal, but others were clearly burned, their clothes singed and their faces marked by fire. They all looked sad and lost, and very, very young. At the center of the circle stood a little girl who looked about 4 years old. She was pointing at us with one small hand. "The man who protects children," she said in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves. "We've been waiting for you." Martinez grabbed my arm. "Bobby, we need to get out of here." But I couldn't move. I was staring at 47 dead children who had been waiting over a century for someone to help them, and I finally understood what they wanted. The little girl who looked like their leader stepped forward. Up close, I could see she wasn't burned like some of the others. She had blonde curls and wore a simple white dress that might have been a nightgown. "Are you little Joe?" I asked. She shook her head. "I'm Annie. I was 5 when the fire came. Little Joe is over there." She pointed to a small boy hiding behind the older children. My heart nearly stopped. Annie, my little sister's name. "We know about your sister," Annie said, reading my thoughts. "She's not here with us. She went to the light like she was supposed to. But we couldn't go." "Why not?" "Because we were so scared, and there were no grown-ups to help us. The fire came at night, and the lady who took care of us ran away first. We tried to get out the windows, but they were too high. We held hands so we wouldn't be alone, but the smoke came and we couldn't breathe, and then—" She didn't finish, but I understood. 47 children had died alone and terrified, abandoned by the adults who were supposed to protect them. "We've been waiting," said Thomas, the 9-year-old I'd seen by my campfire. "Waiting for a grown-up who really cares about children, someone who would help us." "How can I help you?" "We're so lonely," Annie said. "We just want friends to play with. The living children are warm and happy. When they're with us, we remember what it felt like to be alive." Officer Martinez was backing away slowly. "Bobby, we need to leave, now." But I was beginning to understand the horrible truth. "You're taking the living children to keep you company." "We don't mean to hurt them," Annie said, tears in her ghostly eyes. "We just want them to stay and play. But they get cold so fast, and then they can't play anymore." They didn't understand. 47 children who had died over a century ago, still thinking like the scared kids they'd been. They didn't realize that taking living children into cold caves could kill them. "Marcus got too cold," I said. "You almost hurt him." "We tried to keep him warm," little Joe said in a tiny voice. "But we don't have warm anymore. We forgot how." That's when I heard a scream from the direction of the campsite. Sarah Kim. I ran through the trees with Martinez right behind me, leaving the ghost children in their circle. We found the Kim family frantically searching around their car. "Sarah's gone," Mrs. Kim cried. "She was sleeping in the back seat, and when we checked on her, she wasn't there." I looked around desperately. In the dirt by the car, I could see those small footprints again, leading toward the cliff. "The cave," I told Martinez. "They took her to the cave where we found Marcus." We rappelled down the cliff face as fast as we could. The narrow cave entrance was even tighter in the dark, but I squeezed through, my heart pounding. The chamber was colder than before, so cold I could see my breath in thick clouds. Sarah was huddled in the corner where we'd found Marcus. But she wasn't moving. I rushed to her and felt for a pulse. She was alive, but barely breathing, her skin ice cold. Hypothermia was setting in fast. Sarah, wake up." Her eyes fluttered open. Ranger Bobby, the children said you would come. They said you understand about taking care of kids. All around us in the cave I could sense them, the ghost children, watching us with their sad, desperate eyes. They were invisible now, but I felt their presence like a weight on my chest. "They're here, aren't they?" Sarah whispered. "Yes." "They're so sad. They just want someone to take care of them. They've been alone for so long." I wrapped Sarah in my jacket and picked her up. She was so cold, so small. Like Annie, like my sister Sarah, who drowned when I couldn't save her. "I know," I told the invisible children. "I know you're scared and lonely, but you can't keep taking living children. You'll hurt them." The temperature in the cave dropped even more. Frost began forming on the walls. "We don't want to hurt them," came Annie's voice, sad and echoing. "We just don't want to be alone anymore. The grown-ups left us before. They always leave." "I won't leave you," I said, even though saying it terrified me. "But you have to let Sarah go first. You have to let all the living children stay with their families." "Will you stay instead?" Annie asked. "Will you take care of us like a real grown-up should?" I looked down at Sarah, unconscious in my arms. I thought about Marcus, nearly frozen to death. I thought about Emma and all the other children who might come camping at Raven Rock. And I thought about my sister, who drowned while I was supposed to be watching her. "If I stay, will you promise never to take another living child?" "Yes," came voices from all around the cave. 47 scared children, agreeing in whispers. "Yes, we promise." "Bobby, no." Martinez's voice came from the cave entrance. "Don't do this." But I was already making my choice. I handed Sarah to Martinez. "Get her to the hospital. Radio for backup. Don't let anyone else come down here." "What about you?" I looked around the cold cave where 47 children had been waiting for over a century for an adult who wouldn't abandon them. "I'm staying. Someone needs to take care of them." As Martinez carried Sarah away, I felt them materializing around me. Dozens of ghost children, some burned, some whole, all looking at me with hope in their dead eyes. "You really won't leave us?" Annie asked. "I really won't leave you." For the first time in over 100 years, the ghost children of Raven Rock smiled. But as the cave grew colder and darker around me, I wondered if I'd just made the worst mistake of my life. The cold hit me like a wall, but I forced myself to stay calm. 47 ghost children surrounded me in the cave, and I could see them clearly now, their faces eager and hopeful, but still marked by the terror of their deaths. "What do we do now?" asked Thomas. I sat down on the cave floor and tried to think like a youth coordinator, not a terrified adult. These were still children, even if they were dead. They needed what all children need: security, attention, and someone who cares. "Well," I said, "when I work with living children, we start with introductions. I know some of your names, but I'd like to meet everyone." For the next hour, they told me their names and ages. Mary Sullivan, 7, Thomas Mitchell, 9, Little Joe Carter, 4. 47 children who had lived and died in a place that was supposed to keep them safe. As they talked, I noticed something important. The cave was still cold, but it wasn't getting colder. My breath was visible, but I wasn't freezing to death like Sarah and Marcus had. "Why isn't the cold hurting me like it hurt them?" I asked. Annie tilted her head thoughtfully. "Because you chose to stay. The cold comes when we try to keep children who want to leave. But you want to be here." That gave me an idea. "What if," I said carefully, "there was a way for you to have friends without bringing them down to this cave? What if children could visit you but still go home to their families?" The ghost children looked confused. "I don't understand," said Little Joe. "Let me tell you about my job," I said. "I teach children about history and nature. What if I brought school groups here, not to this cave, but to the ruins of your home? What if I told them your story so people would remember you?" "But we want to play with them," Mary said. "You could." During the day when it's warm and safe, you could show them games from when you were alive. You could be their teachers about history. I pulled out my radio. It still worked, even in the cave. Martinez, are you there? Bobby, are you okay? I'm fine. Is Sarah at the hospital? Yes, she's warming up. The doctors say she'll be okay. Bobby, we have search and rescue teams preparing to come get you. Tell them to wait. I'm working something out. I looked at the ghost children. Would you like to meet Sarah and Marcus and Emma again? Not to take them, but to be friends? They nodded eagerly. Then we need to go back to the surface. But you have to promise. No more taking children to cold places. No more trying to keep them forever. But what if they leave and never come back? Annie asked, the old fear creeping into her voice. I'll make sure they come back. That's my job. I bring children to the forest to learn. I could bring them to learn about you. Slowly, the ghost children began to fade, but their voices remained clear. Will you really bring children to visit us? Thomas asked. I promise. And you'll tell them our names? Every single one. And you won't leave and never come back? I thought about my sister Sarah and how I'd spent my whole life trying to save children because I couldn't save her. Maybe this was why. So I could save these 47 kids, even if it was a century too late. I'll come back every week, I promised. I'll make sure you're never forgotten again. The cave suddenly felt warmer. A soft light filled the space, not from my flashlight, but from somewhere else. Look, whispered little Joe. At the far end of the cave, a doorway of golden light had appeared. Through it, I could see figures waiting, adults in old-fashioned clothes reaching out with gentle hands. The grown-ups who were supposed to take care of us, Annie said in wonder. They came back. One by one, the ghost children walked toward the light. Some turned back to wave at me. Thank you, Annie said. Thank you for not leaving us. As the last child disappeared into the light, the cave became just a cave again, cold stone and darkness. But I wasn't alone. Martinez's voice came from the entrance. Bobby! The temperature just shot up 30 degrees out here. What happened? I climbed out of the cave and found a warm October night waiting for me. Stars shone overhead, and the forest felt peaceful for the first time since I'd arrived at Raven Rock. I helped some kids find their way home, I told Martinez. 3 months later, I stood at the ruins of the old children's home with a group of fourth graders from the local elementary school. We'd built a memorial there, a stone circle with 47 small plaques, each bearing a child's name. This is where Mary and Thomas and little Joe lived, I told the students. They were just like you. They liked to play games and tell stories and laugh with their friends. What happened to them? Asked a girl named Emma, not the Emma Henderson, but another little girl with the same curious eyes. There was a fire, and they died. But they want children today to know their names and remember that they lived here once. As we talked about history and fire safety and taking care of each other, I felt them. Not scary or cold anymore, just present. The ghost children of Raven Rock, finally at peace, but still watching over the place they'd once called home. That night, alone at my campsite, I radioed my ex-wife in Richmond. Linda, it's Bobby. I was wondering, could Annie come camping with me next weekend? I have some stories I'd like to tell her. The wailing children of Raven Rock were silent now. But sometimes on warm October evenings, visitors to the memorial report hearing the sound of children laughing a PB and playing in the distance. And every week, Ranger Bobby Hollister keeps his promise, bringing new groups of children to learn about the past and remember those who came before. Some promises, I learned, are worth a lifetime to keep. My name is Dan Rockwell, and I've been a forest ranger for 14 years. I love my job. Every morning, I wake up in my small cabin near Grandfather Mountain in North Carolina, make coffee, and head out into the forest. It's quiet here, peaceful. The trees are old, some over 400 years, and they've seen a lot of history. I wasn't always a ranger. I used to be a teacher at a university, studying how trees talk to each other. Yes, trees actually do talk, but not like people think. They send chemical signals through their roots in the air. When one tree gets sick, it warns the others. When bugs attack, they call for help. It's all science, no magic, no ghosts. My wife Sarah used to laugh when I'd explain this to our twin boys, Jake and Sam. "Dad's talking to trees again," she'd say, smiling. But Sarah died 3 years ago in a car accident. The boys are 16 now, and they spend weekends with me here in the forest. Being around the trees helps us all feel better somehow. People in town sometimes tell stories about Grandfather Mountain. They say the forest is haunted. They claim to hear voices in the wind, see faces in the bark, hear screaming at night. I always explain that it's just the wind moving through branches or animals calling to each other. Everything has a scientific reason. The Cherokee people who lived here first have different stories. They say some places in the forest are sacred, some are dangerous. But I'm a scientist. I believe in what I can see and measure and prove. That all changed 3 weeks ago. It started with Mrs. Henderson. She's a nice old lady who hikes the mountain trails every weekend. She came to my office on a Tuesday morning, looking upset. "Dan, I heard something terrible on Sunday," she said, sitting down across from my desk. "I was on the old Cherokee Trail, the one that goes past those really big trees. I heard screaming." "Screaming?" I asked, writing it down. "We get reports about injured hikers sometimes. Human screaming, like someone was being hurt real bad. But here's the weird part. It wasn't coming from a person. It was coming from the trees themselves." I tried not to smile. "Mrs. Henderson, trees can make a lot of noise. When the wind hits them just right, or when branches rub together. This wasn't wind, Dan. I've been hiking these mountains for 30 years. This was different. This was people screaming coming right out of the tree trunks." I promised to check it out, thinking it was probably just some animals or maybe a hiker with a radio. But then 3 more people called that week. All different days. All the same story. Human screaming, coming from the trees, always in the same area. The area they described was the old Cherokee Grove. It's a special place where the biggest, oldest trees grow. The Cherokee used to have ceremonies there. They still consider it sacred land. The trees are massive, so big around that 6 people holding hands couldn't circle one trunk. I decided to investigate, not because I believed in ghosts, but because I needed to find out what was really happening. Maybe someone was hurt and hiding in the area. Maybe kids were playing pranks. There had to be a normal explanation. I packed my gear, recording equipment, a camera, first aid kit, and my radio. I know these woods better than anyone. If something was wrong, I'd figure it out. Walking toward the grove that first time, I remember thinking how quiet it was. Usually the forest is full of sounds, birds singing, squirrels chattering, insects buzzing. But as I got closer to the old trees, everything went silent. Even my footsteps on the leaves seemed too loud. The Cherokee Grove sits in a small valley surrounded by rocky hills. The trees here are giants, ancient oaks and maples with trunks so wide and tall they block out most of the sky. Moss hangs from their branches like curtains. It's always darker here, even on sunny days. I set up my recording equipment near the biggest tree, an oak. That must be 500 years old. Its bark is thick and scarred with deep grooves that almost look like, well, like faces if you use your imagination, but they're just patterns in the bark. Natural growth rings and damage from storms over the centuries. I waited there for 2 hours that first day. Nothing happened. No screaming, no strange sounds, just normal forest noise. I was starting to feel silly when the sun began to set. Time to head home. But as I packed up my gear, I heard something. Faint at first, like wind, but different. I stopped moving and listened hard. It was coming from the big oak tree, a low, moaning sound, like someone crying. But the air was completely still, no wind at all. I put my hand on the tree trunk. The sound got louder. Not wind, not animals. It sounded like a person, like someone trapped inside the tree, trying to get out. That's when I knew this wasn't going to be a normal investigation. I came back the next morning with better equipment. Professional recording gear, the kind scientists use to study whale songs or bird calls. If there were sounds coming from these trees, I was going to record them and figure out what they really were. The Cherokee Grove felt different in daylight. Still quiet, but not scary. Just old and peaceful. I set up 3 recording stations around the biggest trees, each one sensitive enough to pick up a mouse scratching 20 feet away. Then I waited. For most of the day, nothing happened. I recorded normal forest sounds, a woodpecker, some crows, wind in the leaves. I was starting to think the whole thing was just people's imagination when the sun began to set. That's when I heard the first scream. It started low, like someone taking a deep breath. Then it got louder and louder. It was definitely human, a voice full of pain and fear. But it wasn't coming from anywhere around me. It was coming from inside Todd, the giant oak tree. I grabbed my headphones and listened to the live recording. The sound was clear, real. Definitely a human voice screaming in what sounded like a different language. But the voice was too loud, too deep. Like someone had taken a normal scream and made it echo through a cave. The scream lasted almost a full minute, then faded away. My hands were shaking as I checked the equipment. Everything was working perfectly. The sound was real. Then another tree started screaming. This one was a maple about 50 feet away. Same type of sound, human but wrong somehow. Too big, too deep, and definitely coming from inside the tree trunk, not from any person hiding nearby. I walked around both trees looking for speakers or any kind of trick. Nothing. Just old bark and moss. When I pressed my ear against the oak trunk, I could feel vibrations like the tree itself was making the sound. A third tree joined in, then a fourth. Within minutes, the whole grove was filled with screaming. Different voices, different languages, but all human, all in terrible pain. I ran. I'm not proud of that, but I ran. I grabbed my gear and got out of there as fast as I could. The screaming followed me halfway up the hill before it finally stopped. Back at my cabin, I played the recordings over and over. The sounds were impossible. Trees don't have vocal cords. They don't have lungs. They can't scream like people. But the evidence was right there on my computer. I called my friend Marcus, who studies forest biology at the university. I sent him the audio files without telling him where they came from. He called back an hour later. Dan, where did you get these recordings? What do you think they are? They sound human, but the frequency analysis is all wrong. The vocal range is too wide. No person could make sounds this deep and this high at the same time. And the volume, this would have to be someone with lungs the size of a car. Could it be animals? Maybe bears or mountain lions? No way. I've heard every animal sound in North Carolina. This is human speech, but impossible human speech. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those trees, about the Cherokee stories my grandmother used to tell me, about things that happened in these mountains long before I was born. The next morning, I decided to do some research. I drove to the local library and asked to see the old records about Grandfather Mountain. Historical documents, Cherokee stories, anything that might explain what I'd heard. What I found made my blood run cold. In 1763, a Cherokee family, a mother, father, and 3 children, came to the grove to sign a peace treaty with white settlers. They were supposed to be protected, safe. Instead, they were murdered, shot down while they stood next to the big oak tree. According to the Cherokee oral history, the family's blood soaked into the roots of the ancient trees. The Cherokee believed that when someone dies violently in a sacred place, their spirit can become trapped there, bound to the earth, unable to move on. The document was old and hard to read, but one line was clear. The trees that drank their blood now cry with their voices. I told myself it was just a story, just old superstition. But I couldn't stop thinking about those recordings, about voices crying out in pain, trapped in the wood. I had to go back. This time, I brought camping gear. If the trees only made sounds at night, I needed to be there at night. I also brought a Cherokee translation app on my phone. If the voices were really speaking Cherokee, maybe I could understand what they were saying. I set up camp just outside the grove as the sun went down. The forest was quiet again, like it was holding its breath. I had my recording equipment ready, my camera charged, and my notebook out. Whatever happened, I was going to document everything. The first scream started at exactly 2:17 a.m. This time I was ready. I held up my phone. Trying to translate the words. Some of it was too distorted, but I caught pieces. Help us. Can't leave. Trapped. More trees joined in. The whole grove was alive with voices now, all speaking Cherokee, all begging for help. I walked closer to the big oak, the one where the family had died. That's when I saw something that made me drop my phone. The bark was moving, not like wind was blowing it. The deep grooves in the bark were shifting, changing shape, and for just a moment I could swear I saw faces. Human faces, twisted in pain, trying to push through from inside the tree. The screaming got louder, more desperate. And then I heard something that made my heart stop. One of the voices was speaking English. "Help us," it said, clear as day. "Please, we can't get out." I backed away from the tree, but the voice followed me. "You can hear us. You're the first one who can hear us clearly. Please, we've been trapped here so long." I wanted to run again, but something kept me there. The voice sounded so sad, so hopeless, like someone who had been calling for help for hundreds of years and never been answered. "What do you want?" I whispered. "Freedom," the voice said. "Justice. The man who killed us. His family. They need to know what he did." I realized I was talking to the ghost of someone who died over 200 years ago, and somehow that ghost was living inside a tree. I didn't sleep for the next 3 days. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard those voices. I kept thinking about what the spirit had told me about justice, about the killer's family. I tried to research the murder, but the records from 1763 were incomplete. All I could find was that a settler named William Hartwell had been involved, but he disappeared right after the killings. I decided I needed help, real help from someone who understood Cherokee culture. I called the Cherokee Nation offices and explained that I was researching historical events at Grandfather Mountain. They connected me with an elder named Joseph Running Bear. Joseph was in his 70s, with gray hair and kind eyes. But when I told him about the Cherokee Grove and what I'd been hearing, his face went very serious. "You shouldn't go back there alone," he said. "Those trees, we've known about them for generations. They're not just trees anymore." "What do you mean?" "When someone dies violently on sacred ground, their spirit can bind with the earth itself. The trees absorbed their blood, their pain, their anger. They became living prisons." Joseph agreed to come with me to the grove, but only during daylight. "The spirits are stronger at night," he explained. "During the day, we might be able to communicate safely." We hiked to the grove together the next afternoon. Joseph brought sage for smudging and tobacco for offerings. As soon as we entered the circle of ancient trees, he stopped walking. "They know we're here," he said quietly. He was right. I could feel it too. A sense of being watched. The trees seemed more alive somehow, like they were paying attention to us. Joseph approached the big oak tree where the family had died. He placed tobacco at its base and spoke in Cherokee. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was respectful, like he was asking permission. Almost immediately we heard a response. Not screaming this time, but voices talking quietly in Cherokee. Joseph listened carefully, sometimes asking questions. The conversation went on for almost an hour. Finally, he turned to me with a troubled expression. "They've been waiting for someone like you, someone who could hear them and help them. The family's spirits are trapped here because they never received justice. Their killer went unpunished, and now his descendants live nearby, not knowing what their ancestor did." "What descendants?" "The Hartwell family. They still live in these mountains. The spirits want them to know the truth." I knew the Hartwells. Tom Hartwell owned a hardware store in town. Nice G. We went to my church. His kids played Little League with my boys. The idea that his ancestor was a murderer seemed impossible, but that night, the trees made it clear they wouldn't wait much longer. I was back at my cabin trying to sleep when I heard them. The screaming was louder than ever, and it was coming from right outside my windows. I looked out and saw something that made my heart race. Tree branches were pressed against the glass, but not just touching it. They were moving against it deliberately, like fingers tapping. The branches weren't supposed to be able to reach my cabin. The nearest trees were 50 feet away. I grabbed a flashlight and went outside. The branches pulled back as soon as I opened the door, but I could see them clearly in the beam of light. They had grown. Somehow, impossibly, the trees had extended their branches all the way to my house. Dan. The voice came from the darkness beyond my porch light. I couldn't see which tree was speaking, but it was the same voice I had heard in the grove. We're running out of time. What do you mean? Our connection to this world is fading. Soon, we'll be trapped in silence forever. You have to help us now. How? Bring the Hartwell family to the grove. Let them hear the truth. I wanted to argue, to say it wasn't fair to blame someone for their ancestors' crimes. But then I heard something else. Crying. The sound of children weeping. The Cherokee children who had been murdered in the grove. Okay, I said. I'll try. The branches withdrew, sliding back through the darkness to their original trees. But I knew they'd be watching me, waiting to see if I kept my promise. The next morning, I went to Tom Hartwell's hardware store. I'd known Tom for years, but I'd never noticed how much he looked like the old portrait of William Hartwell I'd found in the historical records. Same nose, same chin, same gray eyes. Tom, I need to ask you something strange, I said. Do you know anything about your family history from the 1700s? Tom looked puzzled. A little. My family's been in these mountains for generations. Why? I'm doing some research about historical events in the area. I think your ancestor William might have been involved in something important. William Hartwell? Yeah, he was one of the first settlers here. Family legend says he disappeared one day and never came back. Why? I took a deep breath. I think he might have been involved in some violence against the Cherokee. I've found some evidence and, well, this might sound crazy, but I think the Cherokee spirits are still here, still trying to tell their story. Tom stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Dan, are you feeling okay? You're talking about ghosts. I know how it sounds, but I have recordings, evidence, and I think they want to talk to your family. Tom shook his head. Even if this is real, which I doubt, why would my family be responsible for something that happened 260 years ago? Because they've never received justice, never had their story told. They just want someone to know what really happened. I spent an hour showing Tom my recordings, my research, everything I'd discovered. He listened, but I could tell he didn't believe me. Not really. Look, Dan, if it'll make you feel better, I'll come take a look at this grove. But I'm not bringing my wife and kids to some supposedly haunted forest. Fair enough. How about tonight? The spirits are most active after dark. Tom agreed, mostly to humor me, I think. But as we shook hands, I noticed something. His skin was cold, and for just a moment, his eyes looked different. Older, like someone else was looking out through them. That night, everything went wrong. Tom met me at the trailhead just after sunset. He'd brought a flashlight and a skeptical attitude, but he seemed nervous despite his doubts. I still think this is crazy, he said as we hiked toward the grove. But my wife says I should listen to you. She says you are usually pretty level-headed. I know how it sounds, Tom. A month ago, I would have said the same thing. As we got closer to the Cherokee Grove, the forest went quiet again. Tom noticed it too. Where are all the animals? He asked. They avoid this area at night. We entered the circle of ancient trees. Even with our flashlights, it was dark. The massive trunks seemed to absorb light, creating deep shadows everywhere. Tom stayed close to me as we walked toward the big oak. This is where it happened, I said. Where your ancestor killed the Cherokee family. You don't know that for sure, Tom said, but his voice was shaky. That's when the screaming started. It was louder than I'd ever heard it before. coming from every tree at once. Tom dropped his flashlight and grabbed my arm. "What the hell is that?" "The Cherokee family. They want to tell you what happened." The screaming faded, replaced by voices speaking in Cherokee. Tom was breathing hard, looking around wildly for the source of the sounds. "It's coming from the trees," he whispered. "The sound is actually coming from inside the trees." One voice separated from the others, speaking English in a sad, clear tone. "William Hartwell came to us with promises of peace. He said he wanted to make a treaty. We trusted him." Tom went completely pale. That's impossible. We brought our children to show good faith. We offered him food, gifts. We signed his papers." The voice got angry, filled with pain. "Then his men came out of the woods. They had guns. William laughed and said there would be no treaty, no peace, only our land for his people." "No," Tom whispered. "No, my ancestor wouldn't. They shot my husband first, then my children. I tried to run, but William shot me as I reached this tree. Our blood soaked into the sacred ground." Another voice joined in, deeper, angry. "I am Running Wolf, Fat, her of this family. We trusted the white man's word. We died for that trust." More voices now, all telling the same story. The Cherokee family had come in peace and been murdered for their land. William Hartwell had planned it from the beginning. Tom was shaking his head, backing away from the trees. "This isn't real. People don't live in trees. Voices don't come from wood." But then something happened that made both of us freeze in terror. The bark on the big oak tree began to change. The deep grooves shifted and moved, forming shapes. Faces, human faces, twisted in pain and anger. And one of those faces looked exactly like Tom. "You have his blood," the spirit said. "You have his face. You carry his guilt." "I didn't do anything," Tom shouted. "I wasn't even born." "But you benefit from his crime. Your family owns land that was bought with our blood. You live in peace that was built on our murder." Tom turned to run, but the trees wouldn't let him. Branches swept down from the darkness above, wrapping around his arms and legs. Not gently. They gripped him tight enough to bruise. He struggled, but the branches were too strong. "Let him go!" I shouted, grabbing one of the branches. It felt warm, like human skin, and I could feel a pulse running through it. "He must hear all of it," the spirit said. "He must know what his family owes." More branches reached for me, but I dodged them. "This isn't justice. He's not responsible for what happened. His family has lived on stolen land for generations. They've profited from our deaths. Someone must answer." That's when I understood. The spirits weren't just angry about the murder. They were angry about being forgotten. About 260 years of silence while the Hartwell family prospered on land taken through violence. Tom was crying now, still trapped in the tree's grip. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry for what my ancestor did, but please let me go. I have kids." "So did we," the spirits replied. The branches tightened, and I heard Tom's arm crack. He screamed in pain. That's when I made a decision that probable. He saved both our lives. "Wait," I called to the spirits. "There's another way to get justice." The branches stopped squeezing, but didn't release Tom. "What way?" the spirits asked. "Let people know the truth. Not just Tom, but everyone. Let me tell your story. Let me make sure people remember what really happened here." There was silence for a long moment. Then the spirits began talking among themselves in Cherokee. I couldn't understand the words, but I could feel their emotions. Anger, sadness, hope. Finally, the main spirit spoke again. "You would do this? Tell our story truthfully." "Yes. I'll research everything. I'll document it properly. I'll make sure the Cherokee Nation knows. I'll make sure the history books get corrected." "And the Hartwell family? What about their debt to us?" I looked at Tom, still trapped in the tree's grip. "Tom, what if your family gave some of the land back, or donated money to Cherokee causes? Something to honor the family that died here. Tom nodded quickly. Yes, whatever you want. Just, please, let me go. The spirits were quiet for another long moment. Then, slowly, the branches began to release Tom. He fell to his knees, holding his injured arm. We will accept this, the spirits said. But if you break your promises, we will find you. Both of you. The faces in the bark began to fade, and the voices grew quieter. We have waited so long to have our story told, the spirit said sadly. So long to be remembered. I won't let you be forgotten again, I promised. As we helped Tom out of the grove, the trees went silent, but I could feel them watching us, waiting to see if we would keep our word. That was 3 months ago. Tom's arm healed, though he still has nightmares about the trees. But he kept his promise. His family donated 50 acres of their land to the Cherokee Nation for a memorial park. They also funded a scholarship program for Cherokee students studying environmental science. I kept my promise too. I've spent the last 3 months researching and documenting everything that happened in 1763. The Cherokee Nation helped me access their oral histories, and I found more historical records that confirmed the spirit's story. William Hartwell really was a murderer who used the promise of peace to lure an innocent family to their deaths. I've written a full report that's been accepted by the North Carolina Historical Society. It will be published next month, and there are plans for a memorial marker at the Cherokee Grove. The Cherokee Nation is also creating educational materials to make sure this story is taught in local schools. The trees have been quiet since that night. Sometimes, when I visit the grove during the day, I think I can feel the spirits there, but they seem peaceful now. Resting. My boys, Jake and Sam, know the whole story. At first they thought I was crazy, but when I played them the recordings, they believed me. They've even volunteered to help maintain the memorial when it's built. Dad, Sam asked me last week, do you think Mom is watching over us like those Cherokee spirits were watching over the grove? It's a good question. I used to think death was just the end, that people don't stick around as ghosts or spirits. But after what I experienced in those trees, I'm not so sure. Maybe love and pain and injustice really can bind a spirit to a place. Maybe death isn't always the end. I still work as a forest ranger. I still believe in science and natural explanations for most things. But now I also believe that some places hold memories. Some trees remember what they've seen. Some voices echo across centuries, waiting for someone to listen. The Cherokee Grove is protected now, marked as a sacred site. Hikers are welcome during the day, but the area is closed at night. Not because of any official ghost policy, but because the Cherokee Nation requested it, and I agreed. Sometimes, on very quiet nights when the wind is still, I think I can hear faint voices drifting down from the mountain. Not screaming anymore, not crying, just talking quietly among themselves, the way a family might talk around a dinner table. I like to think they're at peace now, that their story is finally being told, their lives finally being remembered. But I also know that there are other old places in these mountains, other trees that have seen violence and injustice, other voices that might be waiting for someone to listen. And if they call to me, I'll answer, because some stories are too important to stay buried, and some voices are too precious to let fade into silence. That's what I've learned from the screaming trees of Grandfather Mountain. The dead don't always rest quietly, especially when they died unjustly. But they're not monsters. They're not evil. They're just people who want their stories remembered, their lives honored, their pain acknowledged. And sometimes, if you listen carefully and treat them with respect, they'll trust you with the most powerful thing they have left, the truth. My name is Dan Rockwell, and I'm still a forest ranger. But now I'm also something else, a keeper of memories, a voice for the voiceless, a bridge between the past and the present. And in these ancient mountains, that might be the most important job of all. My name is Catherine Moonrunner, but everyone calls me Kate. I've been a park ranger for 7 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. Bears, lost hikers, drug runners. None of that prepared me for what happened at Stone Mountain last winter. I'm not like the other rangers. My mom was Cherokee, my dad Irish, and I spent years in college studying our people's history. Got my PhD in anthropology before I ever put on a ranger uniform. The other guys think I'm weird for caring so much about old rocks with pictures carved on them, but those petroglyphs tell stories. They're not just scratches in stone. They're pieces of my grandmother's world that I never got to know. Stone Mountain sits at 4,100 feet in the George Washington National Forest. Most visitors stick to the main trails, but I spend my time up at the petroglyph site. It's a sacred place, was sacred long before white folks started mapping these hills. The Cherokee called it the dancing ground, where warriors would perform shadow ceremonies to protect the tribe. I always figured the old stories were just that, stories. Cultural memory passed down through generations, getting mixed up with myth along the way. That's what they taught us in graduate school. Study the symbols, understand their cultural meaning, but don't get caught up believing the magic was real. My grandmother died when I was 12, before she could teach me the old ways. I came to work at Stone Mountain partly to feel closer to her, to learn what I'd lost. The petroglyphs were my textbook, and I was a very serious student. Every morning, I'd hike up to the site to check for damage. Vandalism is a real problem. Tourists carving their initials over 1,000-year-old artwork, or worse. I'd gotten into the habit of photographing the main panel every day, keeping a record for the Smithsonian. They were fundy, nang my research on Cherokee ceremonial sites. It was December when things started getting strange. 3 weeks before the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. I remember because I was planning to be up there for the solstice sunrise to see how the shadows fell across the carvings. Part of my research was tracking how the Cherokee might have used natural light in their ceremonies. The first thing I noticed was small. In my daily photos, one of the dancing figures looked different, not damaged, different. Like it had shifted position slightly, turned its head a few degrees to the left. I figured I was just tired, or maybe the angle of my camera had changed. But then it happened again, and again. By the end of the first week, I was taking photos from the exact same spot every day, using a tripod and marking my position with spray paint. The figures were definitely moving, not much. A hand raised higher, a leg bent at a different angle, a face turned toward the forest instead of the sky. I started bringing measurement tools, scanning equipment, chemical analysis kits. Everything I could think of to prove I wasn't losing my mind. The stone showed no signs of recent carving, no tool marks, no fresh cuts. No evidence that anyone had been messing with the site. But the pictures didn't lie. The shadow dancers were dancing. That's when I realized I might be dealing with something beyond my academic training, something my grandmother would have understood, but I'd been too educated to believe. I was about to learn that some old stories are more than just stories. The real shock came on a Tuesday morning in mid-December. I was setting up my camera equipment like always when I saw something that made my hands shake so bad I nearly dropped the tripod. There was a new figure on the stone wall, not carved, burned into the rock like a shadow frozen in place. A warrior in traditional Cherokee dress, but unlike the ancient figures around him. This one looked recent, like he'd just stepped out of a powwow and pressed himself against the stone. I ran my hands over the surface. The stone was warm to the touch, which didn't make sense in the freezing mountain air. The new shadow figure had perfect detail, feathers in his hair, the pattern on his buckskin shirt, even the expression on his face. He looked angry. My scientific mind kicked in. I took pictures from every angle, measured the figure, tested the stone temperature with an infrared thermometer. The new shadow was 20 degrees warmer than the surrounding rock. That afternoon, I drove down to Cherokee, North Carolina, to talk to Joseph Crow Feather. He's an elder who'd helped me understand some of the ceremonial aspects of the petroglyphs for my research. When I showed him the photos, his face went pale. "Kate," he said, setting the pictures down carefully, "you need to stop going up there alone." "What is it, Joseph? What am I looking at?" He was quiet for a long time, staring at the image of the new shadow figure. "That's Running Wolf. He was my great-great-grandfather's brother, died in 1839, fighting the soldiers who came to move us west. The hair on my arm stood up. "Joseph, that's impossible. This appeared yesterday." "The shadow dancers don't follow your calendar, girl. When the sacred places are threatened, they come back. They're guardians, Cherokee warriors who chose to stay behind, bound to the stone, protecting our holy ground." I wanted to argue, to explain about pareidolia and how people see faces in clouds and rock formations. But I'd measured that figure. It wasn't a trick of light or an overactive imagination. "Threatened by what?" I asked. Joseph pointed to a letter on his kitchen table. "Construction permit. Some company wants to build a tourist viewing platform right next to your petroglyphs. Concrete and steel, right on top of the old burial ground." My stomach dropped. I'd heard rumors about development plans, but nothing official. "When?" "Well, work starts after New Year, unless someone stops it." That night, I stayed up reading everything I could find about Cherokee shadow ceremonies. Most of it was academic speculation, but a few sources mentioned warriors who volunteered to become eternal guardians of sacred sites. They would dance at the moment of their death, binding their spirits to the stone through shadow and blood. I didn't sleep much. The next morning I was back at Stone Mountain before sunrise. I needed to see the site in the early light to understand what was happening before more changes occurred. I set up my equipment and waited for dawn. As the sun crested the ridge, it cast long shadows across the petroglyph panel. And that's when I saw him. A shadow figure detached itself from the stone wall and stepped onto the ground. Not carved, not burned into rock. A living shadow, moving independently, walking across the frozen earth toward the tree line. It had depth and substance, but no color except varying shades of darkness. I grabbed my camera and started shooting, my hands shaking so bad half the pictures came out blurred. The shadow figure stopped at the edge of the clearing and turned back toward me. Even though it had no real features, I could feel it watching me. Then it gestured. A clear hand motion toward the forest, like it wanted me to follow. Every instinct told me to run back to my truck and get off the mountain, but my grandmother's blood was calling to me, and somehow I knew this shadow warrior meant no harm, at least not to me. I followed him into the woods. The shadow moved through the trees like smoke, always just ahead of me, always visible but never quite solid. We walked for maybe 20 minutes before he stopped at a clearing I'd never seen before, despite years of hiking these trails. In the center of the clearing was a circle of stones, not natural, but carefully placed, in a pattern that felt familiar. Cherokee medicine wheel, maybe, or a ceremonial ground. The shadow figure stood in the center and pointed at the earth beneath his feet. Then he vanished. Knelt and brushed away the dead leaves. The soil was different here, darker, richer, mixed with something that looked like charcoal. As I dug deeper, my fingers hit something hard. Bone. Not animal bone. Human. Small. The size of a child's rib. That's when I understood what Joseph meant about the burial ground, and why the shadow dancers were waking up. Someone was about to build a tourist platform on top of a Cherokee children's cemetery. I should have called the state archaeologist right away. Should have reported the burial site and started the legal process to protect it. But I knew how these things worked. Months of bureaucracy while the construction company fought every delay, and meanwhile the bulldozers would keep getting closer. The shadow dancers weren't going to wait for bureaucracy. Over the next week, I watched them grow stronger. Every morning brought new figures burned into the stone wall, warriors from different eras, all with the same determined expression. The panel was becoming crowded with guardians, and they were no longer content to stay on the rock. I started seeing them during the day, not just at sunrise anymore, but whenever shadows fell across the site. They moved through the forest like a patrol, checking the perimeter, always watching the access road where the construction equipment would come. The first incident happened on a Friday. A survey crew came up to mark boundary lines for the viewing platform. I was at the ranger station when the call came in. 3 men claiming their equipment was malfunctioning, their GPS units spinning wildly, their surveying instruments giving impossible readings. I drove up to find them packing up in a hurry. Their truck wouldn't start, and 2 of their expensive electronic devices had stopped working completely. The crew chief, a weathered guy named Davis, was trying to act tough, but I could see he was spooked. Damnedest thing, he told me. Instruments were working fine until we started marking the platform location. Then everything went haywire. I helped them jumpstart their truck, but I knew what had really happened. The shadow dancers were sending a message. That weekend, I camped at the site. I needed to understand what I was dealing with, and nighttime seemed to be when they were most active. I set up my tent in the clearing where I'd found the burial ground, figuring if they wanted to communicate, that would be the place. I was right. Around midnight, the temperature dropped suddenly. Not normal cold, a bone-deep chill that made my breath fog even inside my sleeping bag. When I unzipped my tent, the forest was full of shadows moving between the trees. Dozens of them. Warriors from across centuries of Cherokee history, all drawn to this sacred place to defend it. Some carried bows, others war clubs. A few had rifles from more recent times. All of them moved with purpose, circling the perimeter like sentries. One approached my tent, the same figure I'd followed into the woods days earlier. Up close, I could see more detail. He was young, maybe 25, with traditional warrior markings painted across his shadow face. When he spoke, his voice was like wind through leaves. "You have Cherokee blood," he said. "You understand the sacred." "I'm trying to understand," I whispered back. "The burial ground holds children who died in the removal, torn from their families, forced to march west, buried far from home. We swore to protect them. We will not let machines disturb their rest. The construction company doesn't know about the burial site. If I can prove it exists, legally document it, they'll have to move the platform." The shadow warrior shook his head. "Your laws protect nothing. We have seen this before. Papers are written, promises made, then broke. And when money calls, only strength protects the sacred." "What kind of strength?" He gestured toward the other shadows moving through the forest. "We are bound to this place until all threats are gone. We cannot rest while desecration waits." The implications hit me. These weren't just historical spirits putting on a show. They were active guardians with the power to influence the physical world, and they had no intention of letting construction proceed. "What will you do to stop it?" "Whatever is necessary." The next Monday, the construction crew arrived for preliminary site preparation. I was there early, officially to ensure they didn't damage the petroglyphs, but really to see what the shadow dancers would do. At first, everything seemed normal. The crew chief, a big man named Morrison, had his workers setting up a temporary fence around the construction area. Standard procedure, nothing threatening to the burial site yet, but as the sun climbed higher and shadows began moving across the site, things went wrong fast. Tools started malfunctioning, chainsaws that wouldn't start, hammers with heads that came loose, measuring tapes that snapped for no reason. Morrison blamed it on the cold affecting the equipment, but I could see the shadow figures moving between the workers, touching tools with tendrils of darkness. By noon, 3 workers had suffered minor injuries. Nothing serious, but enough to shake their confidence. A ladder collapsed, a truck window cracked spontaneously, and Morrison's hard hat disappeared completely. "This place is cursed," one of the younger workers muttered as they loaded up their trucks. Morrison wasn't giving up that easy. "Equipment problems," he announced. "We'll be back tomorrow with backup tools." That night, I returned to the site to find the shadow dancers in full war council. They'd arranged themselves in a circle around the burial ground, and their leader, the warrior I'd been talking to, stood in the center. "They will return," he told me, "and we will be ready. Morrison's just doing his job. He doesn't know what this place means." Ignorance is not innocence. Those who would destroy the sacred for profit are enemies, whatever their excuses. I realized the situation was escalating beyond my control. The shadow dancers weren't going to stop at equipment failures. If Morrison brought his crew back, people were going to get hurt, and I was the only one who could prevent it. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I'd made my decision. I had to try the legal route one more time before the shadow dancers took matters into their own hands. I called the state archaeologist, the tribal council, even the media. explained about the burial site, the historical significance, the need for emergency protection. Most of them wanted more documentation, more proof, more time than we had. Morrison's crew arrived at 8 a.m. with new equipment and extra workers. They'd decided to power through whatever equipment problems they'd faced before. I was waiting for them at the site entrance. "Morrison, I need you to stop work until we can get an archaeological survey done." He looked at me like I was crazy. "Lady, we've got permits. We're 3 weeks behind schedule already. Nothing's going to stop us from building this platform. There's a Native American burial ground directly under your construction site." "Show me the paperwork." I didn't have paperwork. I had shadow dancers and ancient bones and a growing certainty that someone was about to die. Morrison pushed past me and signaled his crew to start working. "Clear that tree line first," he called out. "We need equipment access to the platform site." The first chainsaw roared to life at the edge of the burial ground. That's when the shadow dancers struck. The saw bucked in the operator's hands like it was alive, the chain snapping and whipping through the air inches from his face. He dropped it and backed away, cursing. What the hell was that? Morrison grabbed the saw to check it himself. The moment his hands touched the handle, frost began spreading across the metal. In December mountain air, that shouldn't have been possible. But ice crystals were forming on the chainsaw body. "Must be a fuel line issue," Morrison muttered, but his voice had lost its confidence. The second saw did the same thing. Then the third. Every piece of equipment they tried to use near the burial ground either malfunctioned or became too cold to handle. But Morrison was stubborn. He had a deadline and a reputation to protect. "We'll clear the area by hand," he announced. "Get the axes and manual tools." That's when I saw the shadow warrior step out of the forest. Not just me. Everyone saw him. A Cherokee warrior in full regalia, standing 20 feet tall, his shadow form blocking out the winter sun. His voice echoed across the clearing like thunder. "Leave this place!" Half the crew ran for their trucks. The others stood frozen, staring at something that shouldn't exist. Morrison, to his credit, held his ground. "I don't know what kind of trick this is, but it's not stopping my work." He grabbed an axe and walked toward the burial ground. The shadow warrior raised his own weapon, a war club that seemed to absorb light itself. When he brought it down, not on Morrison, but on the ground between them, the earth cracked open in a perfect line. From that crack rose more shadows. Dozens of Cherokee warriors, all bearing the marks of violent death, all sworn to protect this sacred ground. They surrounded the construction crew in a circle of living darkness. Morrison dropped his axe. "What do you want?" The lead warrior looked at me. "Tell him." I stepped forward, my voice shaking. "This is a Cherokee burial ground. Children who died during the Trail of Tears are buried here. The warriors you're seeing are their guardians, spirits bound to protect this place." "That's impossible." "Look around you, Morrison. What would you call possible right now?" He looked at the shadow figures surrounding his crew, at the craton, ocked earth, at tools covered in impossible frost. "What happens if we leave? You find another location for your platform, somewhere that isn't sacred ground. And if we don't?" The warrior stepped closer. When he spoke, ice formed on Morrison's breath. "Then you join the children in the earth." Morrison looked around at his terrified crew, at the shadows pressing closer, at the ground that had split open at a dead man's command. "Pack it up," he called out. "We're leaving." As the trucks pulled away, the shadow warrior turned to me. "You spoke for us to the living. That has meaning. What happens now? Now you must choose. The threats to this place will not end with one crew. Developers will return with new plans, new excuses. Legal protection is weak. The sacred needs stronger guardians. What are you asking? Join us. Become a shadow dancer yourself. Help us protect all the sacred sites that have no other defenders." I looked around at the other warriors, understanding for the first time what they were offering. Eternal life, but bound to this mountain, never able to leave. existing only to fight endless battles against those who would destroy native heritage. I can't do that. I'm not ready to die. You would not die. You would transform. Your body would fade, but your spirit would grow strong. And you would finally understand the old ways your grandmother never got to teach you. The temptation was real. To bridge the gap between the world I'd lost and the world I lived in. To become a true protector of Cherokee heritage instead of just an academic studying it. But I had another idea. What if there was a way to protect the sacred sites without binding more spirits to guard duty? What if the living could be strong enough to defend them? The warrior considered this. How? Legal protection, but backed by spiritual authority. Teach me the old ways, not to become a shadow dancer, but to be a bridge between your world and mine. Help me understand the ceremonies, the sacred geography, the spiritual significance. With that knowledge, I can make the living world respect what you're protecting. For a long moment, the clearing was silent except for wind through the trees. Then the warrior nodded. We will teach you, but know this. Once you accept this knowledge, you become responsible for it. If you fail to protect the sacred places, if you let the desecrators win, the blood debt passes to you. I understand. He extended a shadow hand toward me. Then let the teaching begin. When I touched his hand, the world exploded into visions of Cherokee history, ceremony, and sacred responsibility. I saw the construction of the shadow dance ritual, the binding of warriors to stone, the network of sacred sites across the mountains that I'd never known existed. And I understood that my real work was just beginning. That was 6 months ago. The construction company found a new location for their viewing platform 3 miles away from Stone Mountain. The official reason was geological instability and environmental concerns. I provided the bureaucratic language they needed, but we all knew the real reason they moved. Word spreads fast in small mountain communities. Morrison's crew told stories about shadow warriors and impossible cold, about tools that wouldn't work and ground that cracked open on command. Other construction companies started avoiding the area entirely. I used different language in my official reports. Significant archaeological findings and culturally sensitive sites requiring protection. The Smithsonian has funded a full survey of the area, and we've documented 17 burial sites that were previously unknown. All of them are now under federal protection, but the real protection comes from the shadow dancers. They're still there, still watching. I visit the site every few days, officially for research, but really to continue my education. The warriors have been teaching me the old ceremonies, the proper protocols for sacred sites, the spiritual geography of Cherokee territory that extends far beyond any government map. I've learned that Stone Mountain was just one node in a vast network of protected places. Guardian spirits watch over sacred caves, ceremonial grounds, ancient trails, and burial sites throughout the Appalachian Mountains. Most of them are invisible to modern eyes, forgotten by the living world, but defended by warriors who chose eternal vigilance over peaceful death. My role has evolved beyond park ranger or academic researcher. I've become a translator between worlds, helping the shadow dancers understand modern legal systems while teaching the living world to respect spiritual boundaries they can't see. It's not easy work. Developers keep coming with new schemes. Tourists want access to sacred sites, and government bureaucrats don't understand why certain mountains should remain untouched. But now, when I speak for protection of Cherokee heritage sites, my words carry weight they never had before, because I'm not just quoting textbooks anymore. I'm speaking from knowledge passed down by warriors who died defending these places. The shadow dancers haven't revealed themselves to outsiders since that day with Morrison's crew. They don't need to. Word is spread that Stone Mountain is protected by something beyond normal understanding. Construction companies avoid the area, vandals stay away, and the petroglyphs remain untouched. Sometimes, late at night when I'm camping at the site, I see them moving through the forest, patrolling, watching, keeping their eternal vigil. The lead warrior, I learned his name is Standing Bear, still visits to share knowledge and check on my progress. You are learning, he told me during my last visit. Soon you will be ready for greater responsibilities. What kind of responsibilities? There are other more untains, other sacred sites, other battles to fight. The Cherokee homeland is vast, and the threats never end. I understand now that my work at Stone Mountain was training for something larger. Standing Bear and his fellow guardians are preparing me to help protect the entire spiritual landscape of Cherokee territory. Sacred sites scattered across multiple states, many of them lost to historical records but still defended by bound spirits. It's a heavy responsibility, but it's also a gift. My grandmother died before she could teach me the old ways, but the shadow dancers are giving me knowledge that goes back centuries. I'm learning songs and ceremonies that were never written down, understanding connections between landscape and spirituality that academic training never revealed. The petroglyphs are still changing. New figures appear regularly, not just Cherokee warriors now, but other guardians. Creek, Catawba, and Shawnee spirits who were allies in the old wars and remain allies in protecting sacred ground. The stone wall has become a gathering place for all the bound spirits of the Southeast, a council ground where they coordinate their efforts. And they're teaching me that the shadow dancers aren't unique to Cherokee tradition. Every indigenous culture that was forced from their homeland left behind spiritual guardians. Across America, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, bound spirits watch over sacred sites that the living world has forgotten. My grandmother's people developed the shadow dance ceremony, but the principle is universal. When sacred places are threatened and legal protection fails, the spirits of the dead rise to defend them. I carry that knowledge with me now as I expand my work beyond Stone Mountain. Each month I travel to different sites, always with official archaeological justification, but really to make contact with guardian spirits and document their needs. Some sites are well protected, others are under immediate threat from development, mining, or simple neglect. In every case, I serve as the bridge between spiritual age and legal protection, using my credentials to get court orders and federal intervention, while the shadow dancers provide enforcement that no construction crew wants to challenge. It's dangerous work in ways I'm still learning to understand. The more I become involved with guardian spirits, the more I exist between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Sometimes I catch myself becoming translucent in strong sunlight or casting shadows that move independently of my body. Standing Bear warned me this would happen. Knowledge has a price, he said. The more you learn of our ways, the more you become like us. One day, you may have to choose which world claims you. But that's a decision for the future. For now, I have work to do. The shadow dancers of Stone Mountain taught me that some battles are eternal, that protection of the sacred requires vigilance across generations, and that the dead can be more reliable allies than the living. They also taught me that my grandmother's blood carries responsibilities I never understood as a child. I may have grown up disconnected from Cherokee tradition, but the tradition never abandoned me. And now, when I walk through the forests of Appalachia, I'm never alone. Shadow warriors move through the trees beside me, bound to eternal service, but finally working with a living ally who can speak their language to the modern world. The sacred places are still under threat. They always will be. But they're no longer defenseless, and neither am I. My name is Edmund Brightwater, but everyone calls me Ed. I've been a ranger in the Cherokee National Forest for 18 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. I was wrong. It was late October 1958, and the fog had been rolling in thick for 3 days straight. Up here on Roan Mountain, at over 6,000 feet, the weather changes fast and hits hard. I'd been doing backcountry patrol, checking on the shelters along the Appalachian Trail before winter really set in. The radio crackled to life as I was heating coffee over my camp stove. "Ed, you there? We got another one." I picked up the handset. "Go ahead, Base." Third hiker this week got lost on Roan, family of 4 from Georgia. They radioed in around noon saying they were following some lights, thought it was another hiking party ahead of them. Haven't heard from them since. I sighed and dumped my coffee on the fire. "Send me their last coordinates." "That's the weird part, Ed. GPS shows them walking in circles for 2 hours. Same spot, over and over." I've been in these mountains long enough to know that GPS can glitch, especially in heavy fog. But 3 times in 1 week? That was unusual. Still, I'm not one for wild theories. My time in Korea taught me to stick to facts and evidence. Mountain magic and Cherokee ghost stories might entertain the tourists, but they don't help find lost people. I packed my gear and headed toward their last known position. The fog was so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. My boots crunched through frost-covered leaves as I climbed the rocky trail. The forest felt different somehow. Too quiet. No bird calls, no rustling of small animals. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. After an hour of hiking, I saw them. 4 figures huddled near a big oak tree, the father frantically trying to get his radio to work while his wife held her 2 young kids close. "Thank God," the man said when he saw me. "We've been lost for hours. We kept following these lights, thinking they were other hikers, but they just led us in circles." "What kind of lights?" I asked, checking them over for injuries. "Blue-white like flashlights, but brighter. They moved real smooth, like they were floating. Whenever we got close, they'd move ahead, always just out of reach." The wife nodded. "They seemed to be leading us somewhere, but then we'd end up right back where we started. It was like the mountain was playing tricks on us." I guided them back to the main trail using my compass and years of experience. But their story stuck with me. 3 separate groups, all reporting the same thing: mysterious lights that led them in circles. That night, back at the ranger station, I pulled out the topographic maps and marked where each group had gotten lost. All 3 incidents happened in the same general area, near what the old Cherokee called sacred ground. Medicine woman territory, according to the local elder I'd talked to once about trail markers. My son Danny called that evening. He's 16 now, and we don't talk much since his mother died. The war messed me up pretty bad, and I wasn't the father I should have been when he was younger. "Dad, you sound tired," he said. "Just work stuff. How's school?" "Fine, I guess. Dad, you ever think about those stories Grandma used to tell? About the mountain spirits?" "Danny, you know I don't believe in that stuff." "I know, but sometimes when I'm up in these hills, I feel like something's watching. Something that wants to help, not hurt." After we hung up, I sat on my porch looking up at Roan Mountain. The fog was clearing, and I could see stars. For just a moment, I thought I saw a faint blue glow moving along the ridgeline, but when I looked again, it was gone. I've seen enough ryos, eel fire in Korea. I don't need to imagine magical lights in the mountains. But as I locked up the station and headed home, something made me look back one more time. The blue glow was there again, pulsing gently like a slow heartbeat against the dark mountain sky. The next morning brought news of another missing hiker. This time, it was solo, an experienced backpacker named Jim Morrison from North Carolina. He'd been hiking the Appalachian Trail for 3 weeks and knew these mountains well. His last radio check was at dawn. "Beautiful morning up here, seeing some unusual lights on the trail ahead. Going to investigate." That was 6 hours ago. I grabbed my pack and headed up the mountain. Jim's GPS coordinates showed the same impossible pattern, circular movements in the exact area where the other hikers had gotten lost. But Jim was different. He was an expert navigator, former military like me. He wouldn't just follow random lights into the woods. The fog was lighter today, and I could see farther up the trail. About 2 miles from Jim's last position, I found his pack hanging from a tree branch 8 feet off the ground. His gear was neatly arranged inside. Nothing missing, nothing disturbed. But there was no way he could have hung it that high without a ladder. I called out his name. My voice echoed off the rocks and faded into nothing. Then, from somewhere ahead, I heard a faint response. "Here. Follow the lights." Jim's voice, but distant and dreamy, like he was talking in his sleep. I moved toward the sound, staying alert. The trail curved around a massive boulder, and that's when I saw them. 3 orbs of blue-white light floating about head high, maybe 50 yards ahead. They pulsed gently, and I could swear they were waiting for me. My rational mind kicked in. Ball lightning, maybe, or some kind of electrical phenomenon caused by the mountain's mineral content. I'd read about that stuff in my ranger training. But then the lights began to move. They drifted down the trail in perfect formation, always staying just far enough ahead to remain visible. When I stopped, they stopped. When I walked faster, they moved faster. It was like they were leading me somewhere specific. Against my better judgment, I followed. The lights led me off the main trail onto an old Cherokee path I'd never seen before. The trees closed in overhead, blocking out most of the daylight. Ancient oaks twisted together like gnarled fingers, and moss covered everything in a thick green carpet. After 20 minutes, the lights stopped at a small clearing. In the center sat Jim Morrison, cross-legged on the ground with his eyes closed. He looked peaceful, almost like he was meditating. "Jim!" I called out. He opened his eyes slowly and smiled. "Ed, how did you find me?" "Your pack was hanging in a tree. You've been missing for hours. Are you hurt?" Jim looked confused. "Missing? I just sat down to rest for a minute. The lights brought me here. They're beautiful, aren't they?" I looked around, but the lights were gone. "What lights, Jim?" "The medicine lights. They heal things. I can feel it working." He touched his chest. "I've had this pain since Vietnam, shrapnel near my heart. But it's gone now, completely gone." I helped him to his feet. He moved better than I'd ever seen him move, like he was 20 years younger. We hiked back to the main trail in silence, but I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see those blue orbs following us. That night I called the Cherokee elder, Thomas Walkingstick. He'd lived on this mountain for 70 years and knew every story, every legend. "You saw the witch lights," he said after I described what happened. "The spirits of the medicine women. They've been here longer than anyone can remember." "Come on, Thomas. You know I don't believe in that stuff." "Belief isn't required, Ed. They recognize something in you. The spirit of a warrior carrying wounds that won't heal." "I'm fine," I said, aid automatically. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "The medicine women see deeper than surface wounds. They see the pain you carry from the war, the guilt about your boy, the weight of all those you couldn't save. They want to help." After we hung up, I sat on my porch again, staring up at the mountain. The fog was rolling in, thick and gray, but underneath it I could see faint blue glows moving along the ridgeline. They were dancing. As I watched, the lights began to pulse in a pattern. 3 long flashes, 2 short, 3 long again. It was Morse code, SOS, the international distress signal. But who was in distress? The lights themselves, or someone they were trying to help? I grabbed my flashlight and flashed back the same pattern. The mountain lights immediately stopped their dance and pulsed once, bright and strong. They had been calling to me. And somehow, I had just answered back. Over the next week, the encounters became more frequent and more intense. Every time I went up on patrol, the lights appeared. They no longer just led me to lost hikers. They were teaching me things. The lights would gather around certain trees, and I'd find old Cherokee trail markers carved into the bark. They'd pulse near hidden springs where I could refill my water bottles. When a storm was coming, they'd lead me to caves I never knew existed. But the strangest thing was how I felt when they were near. The constant ache in my chest, the weight I'd carried since Korea, began to lighten. My nightmares came less often. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. Danny noticed the change when he called. "You sound different, Dad." "Better. Just been getting good sleep." "Are you taking those pills the doctor gave you?" "No. Don't need them anymore." It was true. The sleeping pills, the anxiety medication, I'd stopped taking all of it. Whatever the lights were doing to me, it was working better than any medicine. But then came the night everything changed. I was doing a late patrol, checking on a group of college kids who'd set up camp near Roan High, Knob. The temperature was dropping fast, and I wanted to make sure they had proper cold weather gear. As I hiked up the trail, I saw lights ahead, but not the usual blue orbs. These were orange and flickering. A campfire, but way too big and in the wrong location. I ran toward the glow and found the college kids' campsite engulfed in flames. Their tent was burning, and I could hear screaming from inside. I rushed forward, but the heat drove me back. The flames were too intense, too hot. There was no way to reach them. That's when the blue lights appeared. They came from all directions, dozens of them, surrounding the burning campsite. As they drew closer, the flames began to die down. Not like water was putting them out. They just faded away, as if the lights were absorbing the fire itself. In seconds, the blaze was reduced to smoldering ashes. 3 college kids crawled out of what should have been their death trap, coughing, but alive. Their tent was gone, their gear destroyed, but they didn't have a single burn on them. "How?" one of them gasped. "We were surrounded by fire. We should be dead." I helped them to their feet, my mind racing. What I'd just witnessed was impossible. Lights don't put out fires, but I'd seen it happen with my own eyes. The blue orbs hovered around us for a moment, pulsing gently, then faded into the darkness. "Did you see that?" the girl asked. "Those lights. They saved us." I guided them down to safety, but I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The lights weren't just guiding lost people anymore. They were actively protecting them. The next morning, I hiked back to the campsite. In the daylight, I could see the burn pattern clearly. The fire had started from their camp stove, a normal equipment malfunction. But the way it had spread, the intensity of the flames, that wasn't normal at all. I found scorch marks on the trees, in a perfect circle around where their tent had been. Inside the circle, the grass was green and untouched. Outside, everything was charred black. Something had contained that fire, concentrated it, made it burn hotter and faster than any natural blaze. Then the lights had come and snuffed it out like candles. But why had the fire burned so intensely in the first place? That evening, Thomas Walking Stick visited me at the ranger station. He looked troubled. "The spirits are restless," he said. "Something is disturbing the balance on the mountain." "What do you mean?" "The medicine women's lights have protected this place for generations. But there's something else here now. Something that feeds on fear and pain." "You're talking about evil spirits?" Thomas nodded gravely. "The Cherokee have many stories about shadow beings that hunt in the mountains. They're drawn to places where people have suffered, where blood has been spilled. They try to claim souls that are already wounded." My blood went cold. The college kids' fire was not natural. Something wanted them to burn, to feel terror and pain. The medicine women fought it off, but the battle isn't over. As if on cue, my radio crackled. "Ed, we got a problem. Family of 5 went missing this afternoon. Last radio contact mentioned they were being chased by something in the woods." I grabbed my gear and headed for the door. Thomas caught my arm. "Be careful up there tonight. The shadow thing knows about you now. It knows the medicine women have chosen you as their partner. It will try to corrupt that connection." "How?" "By making you doubt. By showing you pain you can't heal, people you can't save. It will try to convince you that you're still the same broken soldier who came back from Korea." I pulled free. "I have to go. People are in danger." "Yes," Thomas said quietly. "But remember, the lights chose you because you're a healer, not just a warrior. Trust in that." As I hiked up the mountain, I could feel something watching me from the shadows between the trees. Not the warm, protective presence of the medicine lights, but something cold and hungry, something that wanted to feed on human suffering. And I was walking right into its trap. The family's trail was easy to follow at first. Broken branches, scattered gear, footprints in the mud. But after half a mile, the signs became strange. The footprints showed they'd been running, but in impossible directions. Some tracks led straight up cliff faces. Others disappeared mid-stride, only to reappear 50 yards away. I found the father first, huddled behind a boulder with his eyes wide with terror. "It's hunting us," he whispered. "Separated us one by one. Took my boy first, then my wife and daughters. I can hear them screaming, but I can't find them." "What's hunting you?" I asked, checking him for injuries. "Shadows, moving shadows with eyes like red coals. They whisper things, terrible things about how we're all going to die up here." I helped him to his feet. Stay close to me. We're going to find your family." But as we moved deeper into the woods, I began to hear it too. Whispers coming from the darkness between the trees. Not words I could understand, but the meaning was clear. You can't save them. You couldn't save your squad in Korea. You couldn't save your wife from cancer. You can't save anyone. My chest tightened with the old familiar weight of guilt and failure. The whispers were right. I was just a broken-down soldier pretending to be a hero. That's when the blue lights appeared. They came slowly at first, just a few orbs floating between the trees. But as the shadow whispers grew louder, more lights joined them. Dozens, then hundreds, filling the forest with gentle blue radiance. The whispers stopped. In the sudden silence, I heard something else. A woman's voice, speaking Cherokee. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was calm and reassuring. The lights pulsed in rhythm wit, her voice like she was speaking through them. Thomas had told me about this. The medicine women's spirits, still caring for lost souls after all these years. One of the larger lights drifted closer to me. As it approached, I began to see something inside the glow, the faint outline of a woman's face. Her eyes were kind but ancient, full of wisdom and pain. She spoke again, and this time I understood. Not the words, but the meaning flowing directly into my mind. "You are not broken, warrior. You are wounded, but wounds can heal. Let us show you." The light touched my forehead, and suddenly, I was somewhere else. I was back in Korea, but seeing it differently. The firefight where I lost half my squad, I saw how my quick thinking had saved the other half. My wife's long battle with cancer, I saw how my presence had given her strength and comfort in her final days. Danny's struggles as a teenager, I saw how my gradual healing was already helping him find his way. I wasn't a failure. I was a protector who'd been carrying wounds that weren't meant to heal alone. The vision faded, and I was back in the forest. But I felt different, lighter, stronger, more complete than I had in years. "We have work to do," I told the father. "Your family is still out there." The lights spread out through the forest, searching. Within minutes, they'd located the missing family members. The mother and 2 daughters were trapped in a deep ravine, terrorized, but unharmed. The shadow thing had been feeding on their fear, growing stronger. As we rescued them, I began to understand what was really happening. The shadow entity wasn't just some random evil spirit. It was the opposite of the medicine lights, a manifestation of unhealed trauma, of pain that had been allowed to fester and grow toxic. It had been drawn to this mountain by all the suffering that passed through. Lost hikers facing death, injured climbers in pain, broken people like me carrying years of guilt and trauma. The medicine women's spirits had been fighting it for generations, healing what they could, protecting who they could. But they needed a living partner, someone who could work in the physical world while they worked in the spiritual one. They had chosen me. As we gathered the family together, the shadow thing made its final attack. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. The trees around us began to wither and black, and from the darkness came a roar of pure hatred and hunger. The blue lights formed a protective circle around us, but I could see they were struggling. The shadow thing had grown too strong, fed on too much pain and fear. That's when I understood what I had to do. I stepped outside the circle of lights. "Ed, no!" the father shouted. The shadow thing rushed toward me, a writhing mass of darkness and red eyes. As it approached, it showed me every failure, every loss, every moment of pain from my entire life. It tried to convince me that I was worthless, that everyone I'd tried to help would have been better off without me. But the medicine lights had shown me the truth. Yes, I'd failed sometimes. Yes, I'd been broken by the war. But I'd also saved lives, brought hope to the hopeless, provided strength when others had none. I was wounded, but I was also a healer. I opened my arms and let the shadow thing engulf me. For a moment, its darkness was overwhelming. But then the blue lights rushed forward, surrounding both of us in brilliant radiance. The shadow thing's hatred met the medicine women's compassion, with me as the bridge between them. I felt its pain, Centuries of accumulated suffering, trauma that had never been properly healed. It wasn't evil, just hurt beyond recognition. "I understand," I whispered into the darkness. "I've been there too." The lights grew brighter, warmer. The Shadow Thing's struggles began to weaken. Slowly, gradually, its darkness began to change. The red eyes faded to blue. The writhing hatred transformed it into gentle movement. It was healing. When the transformation was complete, I found myself surrounded by twice as many lights as before. The Shadow Thing had become part of the medicine circle. Its pain transformed into power for healing others. 6 months later, the missing hiker reports from Rowan Mountain dropped to almost zero. Word spread among the hiking community about the Cherokee National Forest's miraculous safety record. They called it the Brightwater Effect, named after the ranger who seemed to have an uncanny ability to find lost people before they got into real trouble. I never told them about my partners. The lights still appeared during my patrols, but now our relationship was different. More like a team than a mystery I was trying to solve. They'd alert me to dangerous weather conditions, guide me to hikers in distress, and sometimes just keep me company during long nights in the mountains. The healing worked both ways. The more I helped others, the stronger the lights became, and the stronger they became, the more my own old wounds continued to heal. Danny started visiting more often. Our relationship, broken for so many years by my trauma and guilt, slowly mended. He even joined me on a few patrols, and though he couldn't see the lights the way I could, he felt their presence. "There's something peaceful about these mountains," he said during one of our hikes, "like they're watching over people." "They are," I told him. "They always have been." Thomas Walkingstick wasn't surprised when I told him what had happened. "The medicine women have been waiting a long time for the right partner," he said. "Someone who understood both healing and warfare, someone who'd been broken enough to recognize brokenness in others." I became something of an unofficial ambassador between the Forest Service and the Cherokee community. We set up educational programs about the mountain's spiritual history, teaching visitors to respect the sacred sites while still allowing them to experience the natural beauty. The lights approved. I could tell by the ways. They danced during the full moon ceremonies we started holding at the visitor center. But sometimes, late at night when I'm alone on patrol, I remember that there are other shadow things out there, other places where pain has accumulated and festered into something dangerous. The medicine lights of Rowan Mountain are just one circle of healing in a world that needs many more. That's okay. We all start somewhere. Last week, I got a call from a ranger in the Smoky Mountains. They've been having strange reports. Hikers following mysterious lights, impossible GPS readings, people getting lost in areas they know well. "Any advice?" the ranger asked. I looked up at Roan Mountain, where faint blue glows were beginning to appear in the evening mist. "Keep an open mind," I told him. "And remember, sometimes getting lost is the first step toward finding what you really need." The lights pulsed once, bright and warm, and I knew they agreed. Some people say the mountains are haunted. They're not wrong, exactly. But it's not the kind of haunting that hurts you. It's the kind that heals. My name is Lucas Ironheart, but everyone calls me Luke. I've been a ranger at Jefferson National Forest for 11 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. I was wrong. It was February 1976, and Kentucky was getting hit with the worst winter storm in decades. Snow piled up higher than my truck windows, and the wind howled like something alive and angry. Black Mountain, our highest peak at over 4,000 feet, was completely cut off from the world. I used to be a Green Beret in Vietnam, spent 12 days in that jungle with nothing but rainwater and whatever bugs I could catch. When you've been that hungry, you learn things about yourself. You learn that people will do anything to survive, and most of the time, it's got nothing to do with spirits or monsters. It's just human nature when pushed too far. That's why I didn't believe the old Cherokee stories my wife Sarah's grandfather used to tell. Stories about something that walks these mountains when winter gets bad enough. Something that makes people hungry for things they shouldn't want to eat. "It's just fear talking," I'd tell him. "People get scared when they're trapped and hungry. Their minds play tricks on them. The old man would shake his head and say, "Some hungers ain't natural, Luke. Some hungers come from outside." I thought he was just trying to scare me with old legends. The call came in on a Tuesday morning. A family of 6 had gone hiking on Black Mountain 3 weeks ago. The Morrisons, parents, 2 teenagers, and the grandparents. They were supposed to come back the same day, but the storm hit and nobody had heard from them since. The weather was too bad for helicopters, and the roads were blocked with snow. I was the only one who could get up there on snowshoes, and even then, it would take me 2 days of hard hiking. Sarah packed my gear while I got ready. She kissed, said me goodbye at the door, her face tight with worry. "You be careful up there," she said. "Something feels wrong about this whole thing." "They're just scared and cold," I told her. "I'll bring them home." But as I strapped on my snowshoes and started up the mountain, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was right. Something did feel wrong. The woods were too quiet. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. Just the wind and my own breathing. It took me a day and a half to reach their last known location. I found their camp in a small clearing, sheltered by tall pines. The tents were still standing, which was good. But when I got closer, I noticed things that made my skin crawl. The snow around the camp was stained dark in several places. There were tracks everywhere, but they weren't from animals. They were bare, human footprints, even though the temperature was below freezing. "Hello?" I called out. "This is Ranger Ironheart. Is anyone here?" A tent flap moved, and a woman crawled out. She was thin, way too thin for someone who'd only been missing 3 weeks. Her eyes were huge in her skull-like face, and when she saw me, she started crying. "Thank God," she whispered. I thought you were one of them coming back." Her name was Janet Morrison. She was the mother of the family, and as far as I could tell, she was the only one left alive. "Where are the others?" I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. Janet pointed toward the tree line with a shaking hand. They're over there, under the snow." I followed her gaze and saw small mounds scattered around the clearing, too small to be whole bodies. "Janet," I said gently, "what happened here?" She looked at me with those huge, haunted eyes. "We got so hungry," she said. But it wasn't normal hungry. It was like something inside us, clawing and gnawing. We had food, plowed, plenty of food, but it didn't help. Nothing helped except... She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. I set up my radio equipment while Janet sat by the fire, staring into the flames. Tried to call for backup, but all I got was static. The storm was blocking everything. "Tell me what happened," I said. "Start from the beginning." Janet wrapped her arms around herself. "The first few days were fine. We had enough food for a week, and we figured the storm would pass, but then..." She paused, her eyes going distant. "We started getting hungry, all the time, even right after eating." I'd seen this before in survival situations. Sometimes people panic and think they need more food than they actually do. "It wasn't normal hungry," Janet continued. "It was like something was eating us from the inside. David, that's my husband, he tried to ration the food, but we kept eating everything we had, and we were still starving." "What about hunting?" I asked. "Fishing?" "We tried, but there was nothing. No animals, no fish. It was like everything had run away from this place." I looked around the clearing again. She was right. I hadn't seen any animal tracks, except those strange bare footprints. "By the second week, we were getting crazy," Janet said. "The kids were crying all the time. Mom and Dad could barely move, and that's when we started seeing it." "Seeing what?" "The thing that walks at night. Tall as a tree, thin like it never ate a thing in its life, but hungry. So hungry it made the air around it feel empty. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold." "Janet, you were probably hallucinating from hunger and exposure." She looked at me then, and her eyes were completely serious. "It talked to us, Luke, in our heads, told us about the taste of warm meat, showed us how easy it would be." I started to respond, but she held up her hand. David was the first to break. One morning I woke up and he was chewing on something that used to be my father. My stomach twisted. In Vietnam, I'd seen some terrible things, but this was different. This was a family turning on each other. We tried to stop him, Janet continued, but by then we were all thinking about it, about how good it smelled, how much we needed it. She started rocking back and forth. One by one, we all broke, except me. I held out until yesterday, when I ate my own daughter. I stood up quickly, my hand moving instinctively to my sidearm. But Janet just looked at me with those empty eyes. I can still taste her, she said. And you know what the worst part is? I'm still hungry. That's when I heard it. A sound like wind through trees, but we were in a clearing. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere. A whisper that seemed to go straight into my brain. So hungry. So very hungry. Janet smiled, and her teeth looked different somehow, sharper. It's coming back, she said. It always comes back when there's fresh meat. I grabbed my rifle and backed toward the edge of the clearing. Janet, we need to get out of here, now. But she just kept smiling. Where are we going to go, Luke? You can't outrun hunger, and you're starting to feel it too, aren't you? She was right. Despite eating a full meal just hours ago, my stomach was starting to gnaw at itself. And when I looked at Janet sitting there by the fire, part of my mind started wondering what she would taste like. I forced myself to look away from Janet and tried to think clearly. This was some kind of mass hysteria, maybe brought on by extreme stress and isolation. I'd read about cases like this in my survival training. But then I saw the footprints again. Those bare human prints in the snow. They were everywhere now, circling our camp, and they were huge, like they came from someone 8 feet tall. We need to leave, I said. Right now. Janet laughed, but it didn't sound like her anymore. Leave and go where? It's everywhere, Luke. In the trees, in the snow, in the air we breathe. You can't escape something that lives inside hunger itself. I shouldered my pack and started breaking camp. I don't care what you think is out there. We're getting off. This mountain. But as I worked, I could feel it starting. A hollow aching in my stomach that had nothing to do with being hungry for food. It was like something was scooping me out from the inside, leaving a terrible empty space that needed to be filled. I tried to ignore it and focus on survival procedures. Check equipment, plan route, assess weather conditions. But my eyes kept drifting back to Janet, and I started noticing things about her I hadn't seen before. The way her neck curved, how soft the skin looked on her arms, how there was meat under that skin, warm and red, and I shook my head hard. This was exactly what Janet had described, thoughts that weren't my own, pushing into my mind like parasites. Fighting it just makes it worse, Janet said. She was watching me with those sharp-toothed smile. The hunger grows stronger when you resist. I managed to get my pack together and started moving toward the trail. Janet followed, but slowly, like she was in no hurry to leave. Where do you think you're going? She asked. Down the mountain. There's a ranger station about 10 miles south. 10 miles through snow deeper than your waist, in a blizzard with something hunting us? Janet shook her head. You really think we're going to make it? I didn't answer, but privately I was starting to wonder the same thing. The hunger was getting worse with every step. It felt like my stomach was eating itself, and normal food wasn't going to fix it. We'd been walking for about an hour when I saw the first real sign that something was wrong with this place. There was a deer carcass in the snow, but it had been torn apart and scattered like something had exploded it from the inside. The pieces were arranged in a circle, almost like an offering. It leaves presents, Janet said cheerfully. Little reminders of what we could have if we just stopped fighting. I knelt down tots. Oh, examine the remains. The deer had been ripped apart by something with incredible strength, but there were also cut marks that looked like they came from human teeth. That's when I heard it again. That whisper that seemed to come from inside my own head. Why do you struggle? You know what you need. You know what will make the pain stop. I looked up at Janet, and for a moment she didn't look human anymore. She looked like meat walking around in a human shape, and the smell of her was making my mouth water. I stumbled backward and nearly fell into the snow. "There we go," Janet said. "You're starting to understand." "No," I said through gritted teeth. "This isn't real. It's hypothermia, or altitude sickness, or—" Janet tilted her head. "Then why are you drooling, Luke?" I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. It came away wet. "The thing about the hunger," Janet said, stepping closer, "is that it shows you the truth. All those years you spent learning to survive, learning to do whatever it takes to live another day. This is just the next step." The whisper came again, stronger now. "She is weak. She is alone. She would feed you for days." "Get away from me," I said, raising my rifle. Janet laughed. "You're not going to shoot me, Luke. You need me fresh." I backed away from her, fighting the urge to look at her like she was dinner, but the hunger was growing stronger, and I could feel my willpower starting to crack. That's when I saw it. Something moved between the trees, a shadow that was too tall and too thin to be human. It flowed rather than walked, and where it passed, the snow seemed to wither and turn black. Janet clapped her hands together like a child seeing a birthday present. "There it is," she said. "Our provider, our teacher, our God." The thing stepped into the clearing, and I got my first clear look at what had been hunting this mountain. It was shaped like a person, but stretched and twisted until it was nearly 9 feet tall. Its skin was gray-white like old bone, pulled tight over a frame that was nothing but angles and sharp edges. Its face was human, but starved down to just skull and eyes, huge yellow eyes that burned with endless hunger. But the worst part was its smile. It had too many teeth, all of them sharp, and when it opened its mouth, I could smell the rot of old meat on its breath. "Come to me," it whispered, and the voice came from everywhere at once. "Feed the hunger, end the pain." I raised my rifle and fired. The bullet passed right through the thing like it was made of smoke. It laughed, a sound like winter wind through dead trees, and kept walking toward me. "You can't kill hunger, Luke," Janet said. "You can only feed it." The creature, the Wendigo, I realized, remembering the old Cherokee stories, reached out with one long, bony finger and touched my forehead. The hunger exploded inside me like a bomb going off. Every cell in my body screamed for food, but not just any food. I needed meat, fresh meat, human meat. I looked at Janet, and she wasn't a person anymore. She was walking food, and the smell of her was driving me crazy. I could see exactly where to bite her neck, how to open the big artery there, how warm and rich her blood would be. "Yes," the Wendigo whispered. "You understand now. Take what you need." I dropped the rifle and took a step toward Janet. She smiled and spread her arms wide. "Finally," she said. I was getting tired of being the only one. But as I reached for her, something stopped me. A memory from Vietnam, from the worst moment of my life. I was trapped in a tunnel with my squad, and we'd been without food for days. My buddy Martinez was hurt bad, bleeding out, and he grabbed my arm with the last of his strength. "Don't let me become something I'm not," he'd whispered. "Promise me, Luke. Don't let me forget who I am." I'd held his hand while he died, and I'd promised. The memory hit me like a slap in the face. This thing, this Wendigo, it fed on desperation. It turned people into monsters by convincing them they had no choice. But there was always a choice. I backed away from Janet, fighting the hunger with everything I had. "No," I said. "I won't do it." The Wendigo's face twisted with rage. "You will starve. You will die in agony." "Maybe," I said, "but I'll die human." That's when I remembered what Janet's grandfather had told me about Wendigos. They were once human themselves, people who had given in to the hunger and become something else. They could influence others, but they couldn't force them. The choice had to be made freely. I pulled out my emergency flare and lit it. The bright red light filled the clearing, and the Wendigo shrieked and stumbled backward. "Light," I said, understanding. "You can't stand light, because it shows things as they really are." I lit another flare and threw it at the creature. It passed through its body, but the Wendigo writhed like it was in pain. "Janet!" I shouted. "Fight it! Remember who you are!" But Janet just shook her head. "It's too late for me. I already chose." She lunged at me, her fingernails grown long and sharp. I dodged and she crashed into the snow, but she was up again in seconds, moving faster than any human should be able to move. I had 2 flares left. I lit them both and held them out like torches. "You want me?" I yelled at the Wendigo. "Come and take me!" The creature circled me, staying just outside the light. You cannot resist forever. The hunger will consume you. It was right. Even with the flares, I could feel the hunger eating away at my willpower. But I'd made my choice, and I was going to stick with it. That's when I heard the sound of helicopter rotors in the distance. The helicopter found us an hour later. The storm had finally broken, and the rescue team was able to land in the clearing. They found me unconscious in the snow, half dead from hypothermia and starvation. They never found Janet. The official report said she must have wandered off and gotten lost in the storm. They found the remains of her family, scattered around the campsite, but the investigators concluded it was animal predation, probably bears. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The doctors couldn't explain why I was so malnourished when I'd only been on the mountain for 2 days. They said it was like I hadn't eaten in weeks. I tried to tell them about the Wendigo, but nobody believed me. They said I was suffering from exposure and trauma, that I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Maybe they were right. Maybe there was no monster on Black Mountain. Maybe it was just a family that got trapped and scared and did terrible things to survive. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And sometimes on cold winter nights when the wind is howling through the trees, I can still hear that whisper in the back of my mind. So hungry. So very hungry. I don't work on Black Mountain anymore. I transferred to a different forest, one where the winters aren't so harsh and the old stories aren't so strong. Sarah and the kids think I'm just being careful, and I let them believe that. But I know the truth. The Wendigo is still up there, waiting for the next group of hikers to get trapped, waiting for the next person to get desperate enough to listen to its whispers. The hunger that walks on Black Mountain isn't just a legend. It's real, and it's patient, and it's always looking for someone new to feed. I keep emergency supplies in my truck now, enough food and water for a week. I tell myself it's just good ranger practice, but really, I'm terrified of ever being hungry again. Because I know what hunger can lead to, and I know how thin the line is between human and monster. Some nights I wake up thinking about Janet, wondering if she's still out there somewhere, still hunting, still feeding the endless hunger inside her. And some nights, God help me, I wonder what she tasted like. That's when I know the Wendigo hasn't reached the ally let me go. It's just waiting, watching, hoping that someday I'll get desperate enough to come back to Black Mountain and finish what we started. But I made a promise to Martinez, and I'm going to keep it. No matter how hungry I get, no matter how much it hurts, I won't let myself become something I'm not. I'll stay human, even if it kills me, even if the hunger never goes away.